Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. Let me check my value. I want to make sure that's right. Good. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. Well, I'm not going to be a chauvinist in regards to a time frame. Wherever you are, I hope you guys are doing well. I have guests on the show that come on much later than I am. Apparently, I didn't know this, but Australia's time zone has shifted. So now when Jeff or when Warwick comes on, both doctors are going to have to be an hour later. I feel horrible for it. I didn't do anything but the time zone. It's not my fault that they live in Melbourne. But nevertheless, this is where we are, and they have both decided to still come on. I hope you guys are doing all right. It is early back in the States on the Eastern time zone. And so all of you, wherever you are, if you're under the sound of this voice, you have my deepest appreciation for joining me on the show. A really good show today. We have Dr. Jeff Rich. He is going to be on the show. We also have Mark Sleboda, international relations security analyst. I always said Mark is the best in the business, and I firmly believe that. I think sometimes he thinks I'm just boosting his ego. No, I think Mark is just a fantastic guest. And his analysis going all the way back to the last 5 or 6 years since I've known him has been probably some of the best that I've seen on the Russia conflict. And so it is my deepest appreciation that he joins me. I also have a new guest. In fact, I have a few new guests this week. But Roger Harris helped write the book on Venezuela, and he's going to be on at 9:15 discussing Donald Trump's recent comments on the issue of Venezuela. So there is that. The thing I want to hit first, though, before anything else, is Putin's Valdai speech. It's amazing to me that a political leader in this day and age can stand up for 3-4 hours, be coherent, answer any question that's posed to him, and have this deep discussion of geopolitics in a way that most Western leaders that I have seen just can't do. Donald Trump can barely put a few sentences together and loses train of thought like a dog chasing a ball within a few minutes. The idea that you can stand there for hours and impart your vision of the world to the rest of the world is significant. And there are a few points. I'm going to hit this with Jeff because Dr. Rich has went over. He gave, I guess, a conversation about it on his channel. But I want to have the opportunity to kind of go through some of the videos, some of the clips, and go through some of the things that Putin discussed. Before Jeff gets here, I want to hit on some of the items that Putin hit. Multipolarity. The main proponent or the main thrust of the speech that Putin gave was about multipolarity. This is a different world. This idea of hegemons is over with, that the new organizations, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, have taken on, let's say, a leading role or new role in discussing the geopolitical order and what they're trying to accomplish. And this idea of Western elites making determinations about the direction of the world is up in smoke. Now, obviously, it's not up in smoke in its entirety because the United States still functions or tries to function as a hegemon, which creates all sorts of problems and chaos in the world. But nevertheless, his point is there is no stopping a multipolarity changeover. And while things will be chaotic as it does that changeover, the process is irreversible. There's that. The other one he hits, and I'll hit this one, pirates will be destroyed. Now, this is in reference to France taking the boat and some Estonia and some of these other countries trying to effectively pirate Russian ships or ships that are delivering oil. And he points out that this is piracy. Now, I've made this point myself, that this is literal, in the clear sense of the term, piracy. You are taking a boat, stealing that boat. And even if you hold that boat for a while, you have no right to take that boat because that boat is not necessarily coming to your waters or your shores. This is in international waters. It's the other part where he said pirates will be destroyed. That is pretty aggressive. and apt considering what has taken place. I mean, this is a casus belli, right? This is an act of war. And so Putin is making that point very clearly. This is a no-no. This will not be tolerated. Don't do it. He also made the point of saying Europe has lost its sovereignty. And in Europe losing its sovereignty, many of the best aspects of Europe has effectively diminished, and that Europe will never regain its former glory. That these glory days of Europe, where they can effectively run over countries and colonize countries and direct world events, that this has effectively been completely undermined. And if you're looking at the various economies in the countries of Europe, it makes that point that much more clear. He's calling it complicated. I think it's more than complicated. It's disastrous. If you look at Germany, France, new government just collapsed. Yes, the old government collapsed, but the new one just collapsed after a couple of days of them trying to come up with negotiations to form a new government. If you look at England, again, massive budgetary issues, not to mention societal issues with, what do they call them? English army? It's not the English army. They call themselves a different name, but they're basically a bunch of nationalists roaming through the streets in the UK. You have something similar in Germany, where Germany is bleeding jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs, just bleeding away, with Germany being in a recession. Now, Putin puts this on the issue of sovereignty. Basically, if you had sovereignty, you could buy Russian energy and your countries wouldn't be trash. Fair enough. I think it goes beyond just buying energy. I mean, keep in mind, Europe is lagging behind in the tech sector and pretty much every other sector for that matter. Not to mention their economies are suffering, to put it mildly. But he put it on this notion of sovereignty. You also have him being complimentary to Trump. This part was interesting because there are two things that are happening. One, he's making the point that the U.S. is involved in, let's say, shenanigans in regards to trying to curb Russian oil and Russian energy, and that this is basically impossible. But he also, in addition to acknowledging the United States' role in these quote unquote shenanigans, he didn't say this, but even the Ukrainian attacks on Russian energy fall in line with this idea of going after Russian energy, right? So he acknowledges that, meaning I am aware that the United States is pushing Europe to certain activities, and I am aware of the United States taking certain activities. He even brings up the Tomahawk missile, saying this will be basically destroy the relationship that is trying to be created between Russia and the United States. Again, he downplays it. He also makes the point, though, of saying if Trump was in office, the war would have never taken place, and that Trump has the capacity to listen to the Russian perspective in a way that Europeans can't. This has been given two points of view. In one point of view, people actually, Dr. Rowe, pointed out that this is giving too much fealty to Trump, and that this is a negative. This is a no-no. This is Putin showing weakness. I got to be honest, when I listened to it, and I listened to all, 3.5, 4 hours of that speech and the questions after, I didn't take it that way. I took it as Putin is a politician, and him as a politician is showing deference to somebody who he thinks that he can create some kind of wedge between Europe that Donald Trump holds in contempt and Trump himself. Basically meaning if there's any fault line between the United States and Europe, I want to hit at that fault line to show that there's a distinction between the American president versus what Europe wants in European interests. That's the way I took it. Now, to be fair, it doesn't really matter how I took it. It kind of matters how the U.S. and West takes it. Truth of the matter is, whatever your intentions are, you're still stuck with this idea that somebody may receive what you're putting out in a particular way. So Russia being pragmatic and trying not to expand the war is looked at as weakness. Pragmatism is not seen as pragmatism, which is what it actually is. It is considered weakness. And so if you're dealing with somebody that's looking at pragmatism as weakness, then what does your behavior need to be in order to fit within a worldview that they understand this is not weakness, and I am going to be more, I guess I'll use the term aggressive, in getting that across so we are not misunderstood. There's a part in the speech where Putin points out, basically, don't provoke us, don't threaten us. In every situation where we've been provoked, we have put down and laid low the people, the group, the countries that was effectively responsible for this provocation. He effectively said, this is a no-no. I agree, kind of. Meaning, obviously, the Ukraine war has been going on for 3 years. If Putin feels like he's pushed into a corner, he obviously will respond. But up to that point, he's very diplomatic, and he looks for pretty much any way out to avoid any kind of conflict, which, again, is pragmatic. You would want a world leader to do that. But that's not the way it's being viewed. And you can make an argument, as in the first case, that people were effectively saying this is weakness, that the reason you're pushed into the corner in the first place is because of that level of pragmatism that's being displayed in other cases. I got to be honest, I think that argument is right. Even though the secondary argument of his intentions may also be correct, of trying to create this wedge between Trump and Europe, believing that Trump holds Europe in complete contempt. This whole fighting the globalist thing, as often comes up. Personally, I think Trump is a globalist, but secondary to the point, right? I could be wrong. I mean, I took that as his intention. I took that as what he was attempting to do, and being somewhat more amenable to Trump and being more brutal to the Europeans in the way that he was talking about Europe and the condition that the countries are currently in. He also brings up a joke saying, yeah, our drones are all over the place. I'm sorry for having our drones in Lisbon. But he also kind of makes this point of saying, look, they are doing this on behalf of U.S. interests. That either they need to have their defense budgets, and I couldn't necessarily tell which one he meant. If he meant that Washington was pushing them to behave in this way, basically these false flags, or if he meant, well, they need to justify their defense budgets, in which case they're doing this drone false flag stuff in order to try to increase the amount of money being spent on military and justify that expense. Either way, he points that this is nonsense. He also points that the idea of Russia attacking NATO is nonsense. He points out there was something else. Russian weakness. Basically, we are not a paper tiger. And he even makes this point that is apt, basically saying, look, if Russia is a paper tiger and we have effectively decimated NATO forces, the entirety of NATO that has been fighting in Ukraine, including military that's in Ukraine, then what does that make NATO? He has a point, right? It was an interesting speech. I mean, like I said, he's given his vision on multipolarity. What does multipolarity mean from Russia? And he's given that speech as a statesman, given that speech. It's damn good. It's a damn good speech. My guest is here, so I want to go to my guest. We are joined with one of my favorite guests, the man himself, Dr. Jeff Rich. He is even in a suit today. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm very well, or should I say, хорошо, добрый вечер.
I'm glad you could join me, man. And just for the bio, Dr. Jeff Rich, he's a historian, author, retired government official from Melbourne, Australia, with a PhD in history and over 3 decades of experience in governing. He created the Burning Archive YouTube channel and Substack, where he shares commentary, book reviews, and interviews on world history, culture, and politics. He's written 4 books, including 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. Jeff, always glad you could join me, man.
It's wonderful to join you, Jamal.
I watched your video on quantum mechanics and classical physics. And you were using that allegory, because Putin, I think he mentioned that in the first part of his speech. And you were using that allegory to kind of talk about multipolarity versus hegemony, and how there needs to be a changeover in the point of view. That was Putin. That was a thrust of Putin's speech, right? That, look, this hegemony stuff is over with, and we need a new view in the way that we look at international politics. And this idea of a hegemon controlling events that is done, or at the very least, it is coming to an end, and it's coming to an end rapidly. I don't know if this is a new paradigm. It feels like an old paradigm. It feels like this wasn't quantum physics that the West was effectively using. And I know you were using the term classical, but I don't think what they were doing was classical. The hegemony thing, or the hegemon thing, these guys are delusional in their thinking. And Putin seems to be talking about physics early on, like, force equals mass times acceleration. The speed of gravity is X, 9.8 meters per second squared on Earth. Like, this seems that he's effectively saying, look, we need to go back to a traditional style of realpolitik in the way that we engage one another, not this permutation in the political space or the foreign policy space where hegemon is dictating events. Give me your take on that. I mean, how did you view the speech?
Well, he definitely says the world of hegemony is over, and that the era in which there's one power that dictates is gone and is never going to come back. But he also says that we're not also going back to a world of great powers where, there's, an elite group of powers who get to divide up the world themselves. And the quantum mechanics point is really about what his general point about how the world has changed over the last 25, 30 years, in fact, during the time of his presidency. So it's not just a sort of, YouTuber commenting on it. It's not just a international relations academic commenting on it. It's the person who's actually been at the center of the events, acting within them, commenting on this. And he says that the order of complexity of the international system it has really changed dramatically, and it's in that context that he talks about quantum mechanics. It's sort of like we've got to deal with higher levels of unpredictability, more bigger kinds of changes, more unpredictable changes, more uncertainty about how things are going to go. And, I'm no scientist. I sort of dropped out of science into like grade 10 or something like that. So I'm probably better on interpreting Pushkin. But that is really, I guess, the principle he's saying. He's saying we're in a world that's complex, non-linear, and ambiguous. And that demands a different way of acting by states and a different way of interpreting how states are going to act. And he says that, there are so many players in the international system who can play a part now. It's a more democratic system. It's a more open system. So that this idea that we can sort of sit, Russia and America can sit down and sort of sort out the world between them, or Russia and China and America can sit down and sort out the world between them, is just no longer the case. So I think what he's saying is the way international politics work has changed, changed utterly, to quote some more poetry, but and that our thinking about it needs to adapt, but also the actual practice needs to adapt. And he sort of went through a range of things there as well. So that's my sort of overall, that's the big picture kind of thing. But the speech is also working at a couple of other levels as well, in terms of, what he was saying about Russian resilience, what he was saying about how the war's progressing, and the sort of practical diplomacy that he was undertaking as well, such as, the warnings, I guess, to the United States and also to Europe about weapons and further militarization.
Yeah, I agreed. The multipolarity thing is fascinating to me. And he spent, I would say, probably the entirety of his speech talking about this new world that has been created or that's being developed. And the most brutal comments went towards Europe, effectively saying they've lost sovereignty, they'll never be what they were. In fact, he even made the point, and I want to get your take on this. When he was talking about Trump, there are 2 points of view on this. Some people said that he was being too weak in dealing with Trump, because Putin in his speech made a point of saying, well, if Trump was in office, I don't think the war would have taken place. Okay, for one, I don't know that. I don't know that right now. Two, when he was talking about the attack atoms, he was like, yeah, this will diminish the relationship between Russia and the United States. Again, this is very mild language, as opposed to Europe, who he seemed to just brutalize all throughout the speech. I mean, he called Macron little Napoleon for stealing boats. Napoleon during this time frame was creating this kind of blockade of sorts. And basically stealing boats is piracy, even making the point of saying pirates will be destroyed. But for the US, it was far less brutal in his comments, even though in the speech he did recognize that the United States was involved in some activities. For example, this was one of the comments he made when he was talking about the United States. And he points out that, I think this was on drones, and he points out that the United States was most likely behind Europe's behavior in these kind of false flags.
Mr. Putin, why are you sending so many drones to Denmark? Don't do that.
I promise I won't do it anymore. Not to Denmark, not to France, not to Copenhagen. Where else are they flying? Lisbon. People are interested.
What? Okay.
Yeah, so
He
that was
points
part
out-
of the Q&A, wasn't he? And I mean, you
Yeah.
sort of lose it a little bit with the translator voices or the AI type voices as well. But there was I don't know if I should say taking the P word type thing, but there was an element of just, gentle mocking of all
Yes.
of that with the commentator Fyodor Lukyanov there as well. But look, there are points in the speech where he's pretty tough on the United States, I would say, and implicitly in a lot of his comments, he's sort of perhaps targeting Europe as the front line, but he's very clear that the United States is the principal orchestrating power behind it as well. I mean, there's the reference to this sort of Russian saying that there's no counter to a crowbar except another crowbar. And I've just got the Russian translation of the speech, which people can check. I mean, the full translation of the entire session is now up on the Kremlin website. So people might want to check that because some of the sort of YouTube translations are a little bit iffy. But he's basically saying there that expression means you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. And attempts to control everything inevitably generate tension, undermining stability at home and prompting ordinary pets. So he's directing that at America, at Europe, but he's also directing it at America. So, and the sort of, I guess the comment about Trump as well. He says he thinks that's right, that it could have been avoided if Trump had been in office, but that in itself is a little bit ambiguous. It could have been, but he didn't. And he says, and it could have been avoided if Biden had organized his relationships differently and if Obama had done things differently as well.
Yep.
So, I mean, I saw Gilbert Doctorow's sort of conversation, I think it was Glenn Deason, about
Give me your take on that. I'm super curious on your take on that because there are different points of view on this. Because I watched the entirety of the speech, and I had a very different take on that than Dr. Rowe. I mean, Dr. Rowe went extreme on this. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, he was saying, well, maybe it's going to be a coup against Putin now because he wasn't tough enough at the Valdai conference.
Right.
And I mean, calm down, Gilbert. I mean, the entirety of Russia's diplomatic communications are not targeted at satisfying YouTube commentators.
Yeah, but Dr. Rowe I've seen him as brilliant, especially on the topic of Russia. And he was extreme on this. He was like, they're going to take Putin out of the coup because they think he's too weak.
It was pretty. And look, I mean, I'll be interested to hear what Mark Sleboda might have to say a little bit, because obviously I'm, far, far away in Melbourne, so I can only get a certain kind of assessment about how people are responding. But he did seem quite strong and consistently strong. And, if if you're a political leader who's been in charge of a country for 25 years and is pretty confident of your place in the world kind of thing, and has seen off a few presidents, and actually has to deal one-on-one with Donald Trump, and maintain a relationship and all that sort of stuff. You're not just going to blow him off at a international conference, which is largely for there's no practical business that is done, so to speak, in the Valdai conference. It's about communicating Russia's diplomatic and international message, its cultural sort of its cultural soft power, I guess, if you like. So, I mean, if there is a tough message to be delivered to Washington about Tomahawk missiles, and he did deliver a tough message within the speech about Tomahawk missiles, then I think it's not going to be done, in a panel session at Valdai. It's going to be done through other mechanisms. Sergei Lavrov will be ringing Marco Rubio and saying, get your head together, Marco.
Yeah.
And the other thing, there was some subtleties, I think, in some of the comments that Putin made during the speech as well, that may well, I think, be targeted at a more European diplomatic audience rather than the American diplomatic audience. I mean, on the surface, he was tough and mocking towards Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And on the surface, he was saying, hopeless, they've lost sovereignty, which he also related to their sense of their culture as well, their independent culture. But you could also interpret that as goading them to saying, you can't put up with being the United States being your overlord for much longer. You really need to respond to it. It's affecting your economies, it's affecting your societies, it's affecting your diplomatic reputation. The rest of the world, the global majority, has moved on. Why don't you move on as well and join us in this world? And I don't know if you noticed, there was exchange at one point in the Q&A session where Putin talked about, Jupiter, what's allowed to Jupiter is allowed to the bull, and it led to some jokes about animal husbandry and all that sort of stuff. And, there's a reference there that I would say absolutely Emmanuel Macron would get. And I would say most of, the quality European diplomatic, bureaucratic class, not necessarily Kaja Kallas, but, she's a political person. And because do you know what this story is, the Jupiter and the bull?
I didn't quite get it. No.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of worth explaining, because so Jupiter is like, Roman Greek god. It was Zeus in the Greek version. And the story is that Jupiter transforms himself into a bull to seduce a beautiful young woman, who he then sort of abducts and, seduces. Yeah, because, every beautiful young woman is immediately attracted to a bull.
Right.
And takes the woman off to Crete. Now, the name of the woman, which Putin did not spell out, but I'm sure if he's referring to this, he would know. And the surface meaning of the story was, the powerful can get away with double standards kind of thing, like, what's allowed to Jupiter is not allowed to the bull. But
I see.
The name of the woman is Europa, and that's she
moon. Yeah.
that is the figure from mythology that Europe is named after. So he's basically invoking a story about, some guy who thinks he's ruler of the world, god of the world, most powerful god in the world, raping Europe and abducting Europe. And he reinforces the point. He says, everyone knows about the double standard, but then he reinforces the point to talk about it in the context of, America is applying complete double standards around the question he was asked, for which this is a response, was actually about, America is buying, uranium,
Right.
more uranium from Russia than anybody else. And he's saying, well, it's just an energy source like everything else. America is having its sort of privilege. So I actually think there were lots of these kind of subtle digs throughout the whole thing. You could even say that the whole reference to Borodino and Pushkin to bring in that sort of poetry was actually about that, because he's drawing a direct comparison between Russia's invasion in 1812 by Napoleon.
Right.
Then leader of France, but also a ideologically charged, revolutionary leader, product of the French Revolution, who effectively conquers most of Europe, Poland, France, Germany, Austria, Italy, etc., Spain. He's basically commander of Europe and invades Russia. And the question is, well, who's Napoleon today? It's not France. Napoleon is the United States today. Yes. And it's the United States that's been at the head of this whole coalition, if you like. It's been the guiding star of the group of powers that have effectively attempted a slow motion invasion of Russia through the eastward expansion of NATO. And so the reference to Borodino, I think, is very, very consciously saying, we're sort of in our Borodino moment sort of thing, or maybe 2022 was the Borodino moment, that we start to turn the corner, and also Russia in its sort of national consciousness, its cultural vitality, its sense of political self-confidence as well, has thrown off the invader and started to push back. I actually think that is, it was very much what he was referring to. And, if viewers haven't seen the whole thing, I think it's in the first or second question after the speech. Putin actually comes on stage with a book, and he brings out the book in the first or second question and says, this book is, a book I've got at home. I was browsing it, and, I want to read a poem from it. And the poem is Pushkin, who is the great national writer, national poet in Russia. And the poem is the anniversary of Borodino. And you see, Jamal, for you, I was, browsing a book at home, got out my Pushkin.
Look, I gotta be honest with you. I think it's more brutal than I think the way you're describing it.
Yeah.
Because that poem was I think there's a part of that poem where he's talking about the skulls of something like that, basically the dead. That are laying in the graves or in the ashes of the conflict.
What
Putin is trying to get across to them is, look, Russia defeated its enemies in this case.
Exactly.
But all of those people had to die, and an invasion had to take place for that defeat to stick. Meaning, I don't think we've seen that Borodino moment yet, because the West is still pushing in this regard. And you're seeing two conflicting ideologies at work. One, we want multipolarity. We don't want a hegemon, with a hegemon saying, no, we must have a hegemon. Okay, well, that's irreconcilable, right? Somebody has to lose that. Somebody has to be diminished in that. And the Ukraine military conflict, on some level, is the beginning of that diminishment, but it's only the beginning of it. He very well could be talking about, you're bringing us to the brink of a third world war. And if at the end of that war, a new reality will take place, meaning somebody, either we're all just not going to be here, or whoever is going to be here is going to be the determining factor in what that world looks like after the fact. That poem may be more brutal than just Ukraine. That poem could be a reference to a third world war, with the idea that you lose this war and the reality of the world changes. This is no longer a hegemonic world. This world is now a multipolar world as a result of this, you could say, thematic conflict that changed the point of view in the context of that world. I mean, I guess it depends on how far you want to take the poem or the analogy, but the fact that he brought the book on stage, he is obviously getting across something.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's 2 points. One is, I mean, Borodino was, in some ways, you could almost compare it to some of the doctoral sort of criticisms of Putin for not being, tough enough with the because it was like Alexander and Kutuzov and the leadership of Russia in 1812 was being criticized for not pushing back hard enough. Borodino is a key moment, but after Borodino they withdraw again, and then Napoleon occupies and burns Moscow. So,
well, Moscow burned itself, if I remember correctly. Like, meaning they set those fires. Oh, am I getting that wrong? You're the historian.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yes, you're right. They set it on fire as they're sort of leaving.
Yes.
So you could see it as, and the entire Russian strategy during that war was to fight a defensive war. And you can say in many ways that's what Russia has been doing. It's been fighting a defensive war. It's not been overly aggressive. It's sort of absorbing absorbing a lot, perhaps taking more than some people are comfortable accepting, but ultimately with the aim of being able to push back. And that they will not want to not just push NATO back to the Dnieper River. They will want, as they proposed in 2021, to push NATO back to its 1997 borders, or even have a whole new arrangement as well. So I feel there is perhaps a conscious reference to that as well. But the other thing, of course, about 1812, all that sort of stuff, is this is the whole plot of Tolstoy's War and Peace. It's part of the story told in Pushkin's poem and other poems. It's the sort of rebirth, I guess, of sort of a national consciousness, a community spirit, all this sort of thing within Russia. Now, historians will argue about whether some of that is, 19th century propaganda and all that sort of thing, but I think it is certainly a truth that that adversity in 1812 had a profound effect, and the golden age of Russian culture in the 19th century is part of the extraordinary blossoming since. So, in evoking the story of Pushkin, it was also connected to some of the other themes of his speech, which were all about Russian resilience, and saying that, America and Europe have tried to remove Russia, to cancel Russia, to remove Russia from the global stage. But I think he says explicitly somewhere, you cannot do that. You just cannot remove Russia from the global stage. It failed in 1812, it failed in 1941, and it failed in 2022.
Yeah, it's Russian identity seems to be what he's evoking.
Yeah, and
Russian
like there were
history, Russian
a bunch
identity,
of, well, like he talked about young people adopting national
ignorance,
dress. I mean,
yeah,
there's
right.
a there's a phrase in Russian that Pushkin, which he referred to, Pushkin is our everything, because he's like Shakespeare for the English, I guess,
Mhm.
or even more significant because it is connected to that, huge national trauma of 1812. And I think there were a few other kind of references through the speech as well that I can't quite remember. But that whole story of Russian resilience, economically, politically, diplomatically, militarily, because I mean he was, with the drone comments, he was quite mocking of,
Yes, he was.
the
Yes, he
drone
was.
stories, and very confident, and quite tough in his assessments too of progress of the on the battlefield and all that sort of thing,
Yeah,
but
he went different.
also culturally as well.
I'm curious on something else though. But do you think Dr. Roy has a point? I don't buy the whole Russia is going to rise up and overthrow Putin because he was weak in his speech. I don't buy that.
Yeah.
But I do think he has a point about something else though. Putin made this point of saying, let me find the clip. Basically, don't push us into a corner. Like, don't provoke us. And right here. And I want to get your take on something after this because I think they've been provoking you the entire time, man. Like all of this is provocation. By the way, I think that's Kofi. Kofi is a guest on my show. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's him.
Wow.
Russia, on many occasions, when threats to our peace and security come to the fore, and threats to our sovereignty and our statehood, we are swift in responding. No, you should not provoke us. Never, ever did it end badly for the provocateurs, and no exceptions will happen in future. There will be none. Our history proved that weakness is unacceptable because it gives rise to temptation, to a delusion that anything may be resolved with us, and they may have their way from the position of force and indecisiveness and weakness. Russia will never demonstrate that.
Right there. That's this comment or this statement by Putin fascinates me. Oh, it fascinates me to no end. All of this has been provocations, right? I mean, the movement of NATO, the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, the ignoring of Minsk, the attacks on the energy grid that are taking place right now. Why hasn't Russia destroyed the SBU? Like, meaning the fact that Zelensky and all of these goons can run around completely safe. Okay, what is going on with that? Meaning, from the European perspective, they seem to believe Russia is not going to respond. And all of the provocations up to the point of the special military operation, Russia really didn't respond. And then they respond in this overwhelming way of going into Ukraine and end up in a war that's been lasting for 3 years. Okay, well, the European perspective is if the US gets involved, Russia is not going to respond. Or if we take Russian ships, Russia is not going to respond. And on some level, I think what Dr. Rose kind of getting across, Russia has taught Europe a lesson that it won't respond to these provocations. And I guess the point is, Putin can say that because obviously there's a line where Russia will respond, meaning if you push him far enough into a corner, he's going to come out fighting from that corner. But there's also a point to be made that the reason that you're being pushed into a corner is because they don't think you're serious based on previous things that you've effectively allowed. Meaning, I guess what I'm asking is, doesn't Dr. Rowe have a point? Not that they're going to overthrow the Russian government, but weakness is not seen as pragmatism. It's being seen as weakness and has been emboldening enemies in the same way that Putin just made that point, saying, look, we're not going to accept this. We're going to be implacable because we don't want to give them delusions that they can continue to do what they're doing. And I guess I'm saying, isn't that what Russia has done up to this point, though, by not being more aggressive in how it's dealt with these issues?
It could be the case, but I wonder whether it is not, because I guess you, to some degree, you need to know what the intelligence is
Agreed.
about. Well, you know,
Agreed.
what is Europe really doing? You know, like all these drone, you know, sort of incidents and all this sort of stuff. I mean, maybe they say we can see through the fact that you're just playing games. I do wonder whether, you know, the Czech election was on the weekend as well, so it does seem to be quite interesting timing to be creating an invasion sort of scare. So maybe they sort of assess these events as perhaps not as significant as otherwise. Even the Tomahawks people have said, well, you know, there are reports that they don't even have enough Tomahawks to actually supply them. So,
Right.
and maybe Russia is also aware of that sort of intelligence. So there's that sort of question. But at a broader level, Putin actually says in the speech, in the section where he talks about the complexity and the need to balance off the reactions and somewhat unpredictable reactions of a very large number of players. And he says he's not just talking theoretically, he is talking from his direct experience over the last, 25 years. And he says, there have been times where I've thought about doing X, but then I've had to think about what its impact would be on, X, Y, or Z. And there have been other situations where I've chosen to do nothing because any action by me would actually be, counterproductive or cause a unpredictable escalation of the issue.
Yeah.
And, given some of the zealots and some of the hardheads and some of the hardware involved, the risk of an unpredictable escalation, I think, has got to be something that Putin constantly has to sort of weigh up, not just from Europe, but also from America. So, that would be my doubt, I guess, or question. I mean, is it about a trade-off between things? I mean, if you think about it, say, with the India's role in the oil sanctions, right? That was absolutely crucial to the mitigation of the economic impact of the sanctions and on the diplomatic victory, if you like, for Russia during this war. The fact that it was able to keep India as a neutral partner who's buying Russian oil, stabilizing the international oil price, those kind of things. If, say, Russia had gone in hammer and tongs, American style, and bombed the living daylights out of Kiev in the first 3 days of the war or something like that, and they had lost the support of India, and India had said, yes, you're a strong partner, but this is unconscionable. We've got students in Ukraine, etc. You're putting their lives at risk, all this sort of thing, and you're putting us in an impossible position because we also have to work with the United States, all this sort of things. So we're withdrawing your support, and we won't buy your oil. I mean, that would have then maybe the Joe Biden's prediction that the ruble would be rubble could possibly,
to be fair,
come
Jeff,
into play.
I accept that.
Yeah.
I do accept that. I'm sorry to interrupt. I do accept that.
No, that's all right.
But I don't. But that's not really what I mean, though. Like, for example, blowing up Nord Stream. Okay, that's a big deal. Moving weapons from various European cities, knowing full well that those European cities are directly involved in the military campaign against Russia. He even said it in the speech that they are in the war directly. I mean, that's the first time I've ever heard Russia acknowledging not mercenaries. These are European fighters that are in this conflict. Okay, well, that's a casus belli also, right? Like Kagan, for example, when he wrote that piece, I forget exactly where he wrote the piece. He pointed out in this kind of weird way, he was like, yeah, Russia had justification to basically hit outside of Ukraine, but they chose not to do that. Yeah, I'm glad you acknowledged that, Kagan. Like, I'm glad Victoria Nuland's husband recognizes that all of these European cities that are directly contributing to the war aims and putting in military equipment and everything else, that they are targets, legitimate targets, that Putin has avoided hitting. And good for him. He's trying to keep the war isolated. So I'm not saying that he should have blew up Kiev, nor am I saying he should have done more damage. I guess I'm saying in one provocation after the next, he has been far more pragmatic and pragmatic to the point of saying, look, I'm not going to try to start a third world war. But I guess my thing is, you're not the one who's starting a third world war. They're pushing NATO to your borders. They blew up your pipeline. They are blowing up your trains with civilians on those trains. They are having the Crocus massacre where they kill hundreds of people in that massacre. And that was obviously put on by Ukraine. All of these things were just terrorist activities. And the organization that did it was the SBU. So it's like, but the organization is still standing. The building still exists. Those people who are carrying out these terrorist attacks are still continuing to carry out these terrorist attacks without a firm response from Moscow in going after denazifying Ukraine at the root of it. Yes, you've been killing it out of Ukrainians. A lot of, many of these people have just been dragged off the streets. But going to the source has not been something that Russia has wanted to do. I'm saying, doesn't that get something across that there are limits, that there are hard limits, that Russia is not willing to go beyond, even though the West has no limits in the way that they engage and respond?
Yeah, I think it could be, and I know, and it's just it. But I think my only question would be, if you're in that sort of decision-making responsibility, in charge of a country, if you're going to do something, let's say, I don't know, some sort of, the thing people always talk about is, the Oreshnik, without getting myself censored, I could imagine, maybe just having a small smile, for example, if there's an Oreshnik that sort of landed on the British base in Cyprus at some point, but,
Yeah.
Something like that, some sort of dramatic escalation that sort of would really says, enough fun and games, guys.
Yeah, we're done.
This is what we can do. But you have to be really sure that it would have the desired consequence, and I guess that's part of his speech, that it's this unpredictable linear sort of world, and if you're not really sure that it's going to have the desired impact, given the kind of escalation that could be, that could lead to, nuclear weapons, whatever. Is it better to be safe than sorry, even if that is chipping away perhaps at your sort of sense of prestige, your sense of power. But if your overall assessment is that you have destroyed Europe's largest army, which they have,
Yes.
3 times over, that you've both militarily and politically sort of neutralized the United States in some way. So you don't want to sort of get them so annoyed that they sort of, change their minds and start to go, sort of Hiroshima style. Or then that is a difficult trade-off, but perhaps the right trade-off to make. And I've totally sympathise with what you say, and I do wonder about it. But I also feel that just blowing off a bit of steam about eye for an eye, or let's restore our sense of national pride, or let's restore deterrence, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Which is just in many ways it's just an imagined thing. It's actually not a real scenario, deterrence. I just feel that's the kind of calculation they must be making.
Yeah. And to be fair, I don't fully agree with my point of view on this. Like, meaning, I get the point. If we are here in 5 years, then Putin was right. When we still exist and the war is over with, then Putin was right. He had a point, right?
Well, that would be a good
I
outcome.
think the thing is, though, it's not about blowing off steam. It's about, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a real world example. Let's say Europe have been doing these false flags. Oh my God, there's a missile that fell in Poland. Day later, oh right, this was a Polish missile. Oh my God, these drones, Russia's flying around with drones. A false flag happens. And Europe says, we now have reason to go into Ukraine. And they send in troops into Ukraine. Now, Russia, up to this point, has said, we will kill any European troop that comes into Ukraine. They will be fair game, and they will be, and they would have to, because otherwise they're just putting more troops. Does Europe believe him? Right. Because now you have a real world example of, if Europe doesn't believe Putin, and he thinks, or Europe thinks, Putin is bluffing, because he's been more pragmatic and he doesn't want to attack European troops directly, then they will put those troops in. And again, Putin is now in a corner where he has to make a choice. Do I attack those European troops, as I said I would, or do I not attack those European troops? If they put in 5,000 troops as a tripwire, Putin doesn't attack them, there will be 100,000 troops in 2 months in Ukraine. Like, this is what I mean when I'm saying it's not about blowing off steam. It's about ensuring credibility, where the actions that you take, and when you make a point of saying, I will do this, if you do that, they have to actually believe it. What is the book? In Three Body, for example, there was what they call a sword holder. And the sword holder in Three Body, at a moment's notice, need to be able to hit a button that would destroy 2 worlds. That was his job. And as long as they believed he'd do it, everybody was safe. If they didn't believe he would do it, then everybody was at risk. Meaning, the very fact that I have this capability and your belief in me that I will destroy both worlds, if you test me, was the thing that kept those worlds safe. Whereas when the new sword holder took it, they didn't believe her, and both worlds ended up being destroyed. Putin, on some level, is a sword holder in this. And they have to believe that, don't test me. Now, the catch becomes, if they don't believe him, we're all at risk. Because at some point, they will push that line, and that line will cross over into war between NATO and Russia. If they believe him, they may be less inclined to put troops in Ukraine. They may be less inclined to continue with this level of escalation. So it's not that I'm like, hey, they need to blow up Cyprus just for the hell of it. I don't think they should expand it beyond Ukraine.
That's what I think. But
just blow up Cyprus. That'll teach them.
It's revenge from an old colonial boy. But anyhow.
Yeah, right. No, my thing is keep it isolated to Ukraine, because that's the focus of the Russian military. But I don't know. It's tough. I mean, because you want to be instill credibility, but you don't want to go too far.
I think there's conflicting signals about how Europe assesses the risk, and I guess how the United States assess the risk. I mean, the military people from the US you speak to probably would have a better assessment of the US, but I'm assuming, but the fact that basically the US wants to get out of the war with as many benefits as they can, and minimal risk is a pretty clear sign that they assess that they can't win it. So they don't want to get any further involved. I think Europe has interest to protect in Ukraine, but it's all very much placed or describe those as going in after a ceasefire or whatever, things like that, which is effectively saying after there's a peace negotiation, after there's a termination hostility. So they don't want to, go into Ukraine to, win the war. They want to go in to Ukraine to sort of keep the peace, so to speak, afterwards, and to protect their interests. And then it is the second largest country in Europe. And, it was their largest army. So they do have real interest there. And within the political, groups within Europe, there are people who are increasingly saying, we've gone too far. Let's negotiate peace, for God's sake. There's the switch in Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic over the weekend. The I think the Italian foreign minister or defense minister has said there's no way we're putting troops in Ukraine. There's Hungary, there's Slovakia. So there's sort of, a growing group that's perhaps not at critical mass yet and is not represented in the NATO organisation or in the EU organisation, senior leadership. But they're going to be, the NATO organisation is like, what's his name, Mark Rutte, etc. He's like the American political commissar in Europe, basically. I mean, he's saying, pay daddy the money now. But there's a significant group within Europe that are saying enough's enough, I think. And I regard Britain as a whole separate belligerent because they're just crazy braves there, and they're pursuing their own agenda. But I think it's different to the European Union, Europe's agenda. So I feel there is momentum there, and I also feel to some degree, aspects of Putin's commentary about Europe was actually playing to that growing sort of feeling within Europe as well, and appealing for that sort of political solution to it rather than going harder on the military side of things. But
he's a diplomat.
More of a diplomatically oriented person rather than a military oriented person. So I might be overrating that, but I think
Putin is also. Yeah, I think Putin is more diplomatic oriented, like meaning his willingness to make deals, like the Minsk agreements, Istanbul agreements. Okay, that's willingness to make a deal even after the overthrow of the Ukrainian government. He was going to live with that government, despite the fact that the government had been overthrown and at that point was no longer its own, let's say, master of its own affairs. No, I think he is more diplomatic. If they gave him a deal that he thought that allowed him to accomplish his objectives, he would probably take it. And even now, I suspect that at a certain point, when Putin or when Russia takes Donbass, he would turn around to Europe and says, okay, are we finished? And they're going to say no. They're going to tell him no, hell no. I could be wrong. I mean, France, the government has just collapsed. The German government, I don't see merits being able to last through another election. By the way, what did you make of Angela Merkel? And personally, I used to like Angela Merkel. Merkel came out recently and say it's Poland and the Baltic states' faults that Europe is at war, and that they have too much outside influence in this kind of inability for Europe to come to some consensus on anything real. Meaning, I get the sense that she bemoaned this idea of Europe losing its own sovereignty, something that, I mean, she fought for Nord Stream in order to get Nord Stream in effect. Like this wasn't Merkel had been there, 16 years? She had been there 16 years. Yeah. And so she was the face of Europe in that real sense. And you can make an argument that the power vacuum that was created when she left allowed for a complete U.S. takeover of Europe. Give me your take on that. You would know this better than I would.
I think that's really a shrewd point, Jamal. I mean, I do think, she had a level of diplomat, and this is one of the things Putin was saying. Like, in this complicated world, you actually need skilled diplomats who can actually negotiate things. And he had there was some legendary one-on-one conversation between Merkel and Putin without translators and all this sort of stuff. So I think it really did make a difference. I mean, I can't really assess her sort of, domestic policy role. And, some people seem to hate her and all that sort of stuff. I'm actually planning to read her autobiography in a little while. It's on the desk there somewhere. But I do feel her observation about Poland and Eastern Europe is true, and people do talk about this sort of new Europe, and that was I feel that was part of the American distortion of European politics over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
Poland became, Poland's quite a large country, and it is very instrumental in Europe, but it also has some very sort of noxious politics, I guess, and it has had a very particularly the sort of nationalist, Russophobic kind of dimensions to it, and, which was discussed in the Valdai meeting as well.
Yes,
I feel that has seriously unbalanced, the sort of European politics. I guess it's less France and Germany. You have all the old sort of Austro-Hungarian Empire, including Italy type sort of states as well. And then you've got Poland, the Baltics, whose role is distortedly focused on the military alliance with the United States. So they've become this sort of, American military flank on the east of Europe kind of thing. And I think really twisted things. So I think having a bit of a shift there would be really good. And maybe Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary also starting to move away from that.
Yeah, I guess my thing for Merkel, to be fair, there are people who you like before coming into politics. So I need to put a caveat around that. Like if I was in politics at the point where Merkel was already in office, I might have a completely different takeover. I think for me, it's this, when I first got into politics, Merkel was, I guess, on her way out.
Yeah.
And so she was, I don't know, I guess familiar in the case, in the sense at the point where she left, there was this level of unfamiliarity. I think Macron wanted to take over. He doesn't have the gravitas to do it. So I don't know. Last comment on this before we leave, though. This is right here. Putin is talking about effectively, hey, all of you who are interested in Russia's strategic defeat, it ain't happening. He just says it flat out. Calm down. I think he told him to take a shower or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Trying to destroy that. No, some are still obstinate in their desire to have their way, inflicting, as they say, the strategic defeat on this country. Well, okay. If they don't see the fact that this plan is doomed, if they're stubborn enough, well, I hope that life will show them, and the most stubborn, short-witted ones will understand. We heard numerous clamors about full blockade and threats about blockade, trying to make Russian people, as they said, and they had no scruples in saying that they wanted to make the Russian people suffer. And they came up with figmental plans. I think, ain't it time to calm down and look around and understand the real situation and try to build relationships?
Now, this goes back to your point about him being very political in the speech. And it's like, look, this ain't working. Like, your plans have failed. Look around. And basically, look at your countries. Your countries are falling apart around you. Are you still trying to do this? I don't know. Look, I know for Europe, they have eliminated any of the Russian language, like RT, Sputnik. You can't get that in Europe at this point. I know my ex, how propagandized too, yes, but also how little information they have coming from sources other than the sources that are imposed upon them by the governments of those countries. So I don't know how much of this speech is going to get relayed short of Putin calling Macron Napoleon, which is a shame. I mean, because It was a good speech. It's one thing if people come to their assessment and either agree with them or disagree with them. I get the sense that this is going to be entirely blocked out. So maybe the speech was to the world leaders themselves, saying, are we going to continue to do this? Your governments are falling apart. Your economic space is crumbling. Are you still trying to accomplish this objective? It has failed. I'm going to give you the last word, Jeff.
Well, I think the kind of people like I used to be, the government officials would absolutely be, well, if they've got half a brain and half a level of professional integrity, would actually absolutely be watching it. And it's a pity that people don't actually get to watch the speech in Europe and also in Australia. There's a sort of a media sort of blackout on it. Because apart from anything else, you actually just get a sense of his manner, his way of dealing with issues, his sort of just the calmness, I guess, there, saying, calm down. Look, I've been doing this for 25 years. This is how the world works now. It's pretty complicated. And, I know you've said some nasty stuff about me, but, even so, we can get over that and sort of work together as well. And I do feel there are elements of the speech which were almost an invitation to the European leaders, the European, political, cultural elites, even obviously not the ones who are just mad, died in the war people, but politicians, political leaders ultimately are pretty pragmatic and flexible people who deal with failed plans every day of the week. And at some point, and like as you say, France, the government there has collapsed after 15 hours.
Right.
And, Macron might has got a choice of forming a government with the Marine Le Pen party, National Rally, or with the left. And what's happened in this government is they've, they kind of refuse to go towards the left. So one potential outcome here is they will go a little bit more towards the left and have a more, compromised social outcome, which would probably work for Macron. He might have to eat a little bit of humble pie, but the people, political leaders have, very well insulated, egos that can cope with that can cope with eating occasional bits of humble pie, especially when basically events just force their hand and say, well, okay, well, we lost that war, sure, let's move on.
That's going to be that's a lot of crow, Jeff.
It's going to be a lot of crow. But I think part of the skill that Putin has that like Trump doesn't and like previous American presidents haven't is, I think, and that the other states around the world, China and India, have to do is they have to lead America and Europe to accepting the fact that they've been defeated, but without humiliating them, saying, you can take the loss and still walk away as an important partner in this sort of new polycentric world. And I still think that is feasible, but there will need to be a reckoning within the politics and the cultures of the West as well, because I mean the last 5 years, last 10 years has just been like just something off the planet in terms of the indulgence of all sorts of hatreds really towards Russia. So,
Jeff, I always enjoy these conversations, man. I always learn something when we have these conversations. You have my deepest appreciation. So thank you for joining me. And I know it's late, so I even more so thank you for joining me. Just for the audience, Dr. Jeff Rich, he's a historian, author, retired government official from Melbourne, Australia. With a PhD in history and over 3 decades of experience in government, he created the Burning Archive YouTube channel and Substack. Burning Archive is a great YouTube channel. Definitely check it out, where he shares commentaries, book reviews, interviews on world history, culture, and politics. He's written several books, including 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. It's only 13, huh?
We have to talk about that one time.
Yeah, we have to have the conversation. Jeff, you have a good night, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jamal.
Bye-bye. I always enjoy talking to Dr. Jeff Rich. He's a great guy, and Burning Archive is a fantastic channel. Like I said, definitely check it out. By the way, the various people who was at Valdai, several of those people have been on this channel. Several of them are regular guests. Professor Morandi, he asked the question. I think Putin gave him a BS answer on that question, but whatever, he asked the question. Kofi Kawako was there. In fact, Kofi hit me up while he was there. He's like, hey, man, there's several people who are on your channel who are here. I know Rick Sanchez. Apparently Rick was there, even though I don't think Rick asked the question. Glenn Deason was there. Glenn Deason did get to ask the question, so shout out for him. I'm trying to think, is there anybody else? I don't think there's anybody else that I could think of, but shout out to all of them who were able to go. Slightly bitter that I didn't get to go. No, but shout out to them, man. Shout out to all of them. I'm glad they were able to go. Kofi mentioned he enjoyed it, especially some of the meetings that they were able to take and everything else. So good on them. Good on them. And again, Putin's speech, very few people can stand up there for 4 hours and give a speech where all questions are answered, where he's talking about the international global order, and he's able to do it competently and coherently. So very rare thing. What time is it? Mark is going to be here. In fact, Mark should already be here. He'll be here shortly. While we wait for Mark, Donald Trump has, let's say, been running his mouth as normal. But in running his mouth, he's talking about stuff where he's effectively talking about military attacks that he plans on having on various nations. Venezuela was one of those nations. Iran was another one of those nations. And the one for Iran, right here, where he's talking about like B-2 bombers, saying we're going to hit them again. And you ask yourself, okay, so you're effectively saying that you're going to attack another country. Now, this assumes that that other country won't respond preemptively in that attack, considering you are effectively saying you are going to attack them again. This is Donald Trump talking about attacking Iran once again. And mind you, it's not like Iran is not going to do anything about the fact that you're attacking them. So there's that. But this is, at least I thought this was it. 1 second. Okay, right here.
And we shot 30 Tomahawks, you know that. On top of, after the B-2, how about that? The B-2s, what they did, those beautiful flying wings, what they did, they hit every single target they hit. And just in case, we shot 30 Tomahawks out of a submarine, every one of them hit too. So I would say Iran was not particularly thrilled. They were going to have a nuclear weapon within a month. And now they can start the operation all over again, but I hope they don't, because we'll have to take care of that too. If they do, I let them know that you want to do that, it's fine, but we're going to take care of that, and we're not going to wait so long. It should have been done long before I came along. You know that I had the pilots of the B-2s in my office, the famous Oval Office. I had them in the B-2s. They came in to the White House, and we talked about it. They said, you know, sir, for 22 years, our predecessors and us trained for that hit. For 22 years, they were training to take out the nuclear potential of Iran. He said, but it was only when you came along that we did it. And they were so happy that they did it. But they've been training for that hit for 22 years.
That is outrageous. That is just outrageous. My guest is here. I'm going to bring him on. We are joined with the one, the only, best in the business, Mark Sleboda. He's international relations security analyst. You can find Mark on Boosty at Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, or you can just put in his name. Both of those things will bring up the man himself. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay this morning? Well, it's afternoon for you.
Yeah, I'm alive, Jamaro. How the hell are you? Thanks for having me.
Okay.
It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you, man. I was just having a conversation about Putin's Valdai speech. And not necessarily to delve further into it, but I am curious on your take on it. Give me your thoughts on that speech.
Okay, so my first thought is once again how formidable a statesman and a leader Putin is. He
Agreed.
is educated, eloquent, ridiculously well informed about everything, able to discuss serious events in the world at a in a level of geopolitics and international relations, right? He's not even speaking, he's not pandering to a domestic base or anything like that. He is speaking at a high level about things occurring, not only involving Russia, but in the world, and the the trend towards a multipolar world, in a way that I don't think any other statesman in the world is able to regularly discuss these things. He's able to field questions on these and other topics to again, an uncomparable degree for hours, right? With comfort, with confidence, with dare I say, a bit of charm and humor as well. He quotes poetry from Pushkin, right?
Yes.
On the Battle of Borodino, right?
Yes.
Making points on current Russian French relations, over the conflict in Ukraine. He quotes, not quotes. He issues statements, proverbs, sayings in Latin, right, to punctuate his points home. Tell me another leader in the world at that level that can speak, with such confidence, not reading off of a teleprompter, not floundering around and repeating, hash talking points and so forth. It makes me proud, right, to be a Russian, right? I'm like, our leader is heads and above a statesman, and an intellectual, above all others that I'm aware of. And my second thought was he didn't actually say that much that was new, right? The Kremlin did build up this speech beforehand, like the whole world was waiting, and this was going to be a very important speech. And I didn't get. I mean, there's plenty to discuss there, but there's nothing new. There's no new Russian stance. There's no revelations that I was not aware of before. He just eloquently presented things as they are occurring and Russia's position. Once again, without any, not a single backstep, nothing like that. But at the same time, he doesn't resort to, demonization or crude verbiage against other leaders that Russia is involved in a conflict with. I think he does indeed use sarcasm in a way, but it's in a very polite way. Again, specifically towards Macron and talking about him thinking he's Napoleon and so forth. But it is done in a way that is, only very indirectly mocking him, right? On the face, he was very extremely polite And he never publicly disparages other world leaders. And I almost get the sense, him saying that Trump does it all the time, right? Trump flips on a dime and is screaming about him 1 minute and the next, and all of these, European leaders and everything. And Russia just has a different political culture. Mm-hmm. They don't pander to some nationalist base, at least not on the presidential level, right? Okay, so there are other people that are allowed to play the role of bad cop, Dmitry Medvedev and so forth underneath. But the Russian president is expected by Russian political culture to be above that, or at least Putin has solidified that so much in the last 25 years in various forms of power that it has become so. Yeah. So he doesn't wade in the muck, right, and throw feces around the way that shall we say Donald Trump and European leaders do, even when Russia is involved in what even it's quite clear it regards as an existential conflict with them. But he also, I think, very correctly talked about the state of the conflict, right? Not only in strategic terms, but even in tactical terms of how combat is occurring on the front line without any kind of, with confidence, like with our winning, but without, they did some damage. They do this, we do this. This is, why we're winning. This is what is working. It's a cost, right? But we're confident, we're confident in our military and so forth. And again, there is no one else, all these Western leaders who continually go off on the topic of the conflict in Ukraine without the honesty and without the correct analytical way of talking about it that Putin does.
Agreed. 1,000% agreed. Is Putin going to get couped?
What?
Is Putin going to... One of the commentators, Dr. O, was having a conversation about Putin's speech when it became around Trump. And he was making this point of saying that Putin was being too amenable to Donald Trump. And because there are two things in the speech, right? When he is making the point of saying, I don't believe the war would have taken place if Donald Trump was in office. Trump listens, he's this, he's that. Where he was being far more brutal to the Europeans. And Dr. Rowe's point, to summarize it, was basically, this is being too weak. And because he's being too weak, there may be an uprising to overthrow Putin. Now, I don't buy this, right? But I am curious on how was that taken. Dr. Rowe is typically pretty good. And he's typically, I think this was more ballistic on his part. But what was that take on him talking about the U.S. and the U.S.'s role and some of the hijinks that are taking place in comparison to being somewhat amicable to Donald Trump against, let's say, the Europeans, for example?
Yeah, I'm sorry. When you first said "cooed," using it as a verb, I just had a picture of a bunch of pigeons flocking around Putin going "coo, coo." It's like,
would that be a putsch attempt? Let's use that term, right?
So is this what the alt media is talking about this weekend? Okay. All right.
That's what some of the alt media is talking about.
Yeah. First of all, let me just say that I try my best to make it a policy that I don't talk about other analysts, journalists, commentators in the alt media directly, at least not when I have something not positive to say about them. I don't think that's constructive. We're all supposed to be more or less on the same side,
right?
Okay. And I try not to do that. I think it's
and I don't want you to. I'm just
a professional courtesy. So that being said, I don't always agree with many other analysts and journalists and commentators in the alt media sphere. I've had a very different take on this conflict, I think, than a lot of them from the very beginning. I mean, there are others that I've been more or less in lockstep with the other time. Hi, Brian. Um, so there are very few other figures in the alt media that I listen to on a regular basis. There are some, but there are very few.
Right.
Because not only do I have to, I don't necessarily have to agree with them, but I have to appreciate, their position, and I have to learn something, because otherwise it's simply
What's
not
the
worth
point?
my time, right? Because I don't have that much of it, if only because of that reason. So I don't always stay abreast of the latest alt media gossip of who's saying what and so forth. But I think that's probably a good thing. I think there is a considerable portion of the alt media sphere that pinned certain hopes on Donald Trump and the possibility of some radical foreign policy change in the United States, particularly via the conflict in Ukraine, and have been backpedaling and justifying and apologizing and so forth ever since, and have been trying to justify and continue, shall we say, hoping against hope and that sort of thing. And it's also my position to not do hope. That hope is the death of analysis, right? As a journalist or an activist, you're free to do hope. As an analyst, I think it's the death of analysis. So I think you should be very careful not to project what you want to happen onto what is actually happening, right? This degree of confirmation bias and a lack of objectivity. And I think I'm perfectly capable of holding a political and geopolitical position, but not letting it, or trying, I should say, trying my best not to let it affect my analysis. Others, I don't think necessarily follow that extremely well. No, there is zero chance of a coup in Russia. Like, just it's ridiculous to whoever suggested it, and I'm not saying any, I don't know because I didn't hear it. But if someone is suggesting that, it's absurd. It may be the way they feel. And they're, maybe they talk to a few people in Russia, that are impatient or have similar feelings, right? But that does not represent the Russian political class. It doesn't represent the Russian population. It's not representative of anything. I mean, you can always find a few people that will agree with you, particularly lawyers, on anything, right? I mean, but this is not the case. This is not realistic. I'm certain there are people within the Russian military and the Russian political elite that do disagree with Putin on certain things, but that's it. They may disagree, but there is a power vertical in Russia, right? Putin is a very efficient manager. He listens to everyone out, but then he makes a decision and he goes forward. He has a policy. And we can criticize all we want, but Putin has been perfectly willing to admit when he has made a mistake, such as Ukraine in 2014 and 2015 and the Minsk agreements, right? And very few other leaders are willing to do that. And Putin has the people's trust, and he has the political elite's trust in that no one can manage the differences in the Russian elite like he can. That's his signature skill. Not only does he appeal to the Russian population on a charismatic and intellectual level, but he manages the Russian elite. I mean, it's not a dictatorship in the way that it is usually presented, that Putin makes all the decisions. No, he manages the various, competing interests and different institutions and bodies of political power and economic power and everything extremely well. There is no... If something, God forbid, happened to Putin, say, I don't know, Budanov managed to fucking kill him or something like that, then it would be difficult. But a next leader would have to try to make himself into Putin again. That is, what it is. He has become an institution. And I think that going forward, all future Russian leaders will then have to model their behavior on him. After Putin. It's not that there can't be anyone following Putin, but even after Putin is gone, it will have to be another Putin, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it would
that's
be
what.
hard to conceive
So
at this point.
yeah, I mean, he has an understanding of what is going on in the conflict the way that I think few other political leaders and analysts do. Certainly, he has access to intelligence that none of us do. So all of our armchair quarterbacking, our particularly impatience and that sort of thing. I have felt it at times myself. And when he continues this diplomatic game with Trump, right, rather than just telling him off, like the way the Russian ambassador to the UK, who is allowed to do such things, did in the last week. He was conducting an interview in English in the Western, with a Western journalist, and the journalist pointed out that Trump is very annoyed, very angry, very upset with Putin. And the response of the Russian ambassador to the UK was, "And so what?" He's allowed to do. The Russian president has, is engaging in this diplomatic game for reasons of dealing with, what is a desperate but still potent lashing out of a dying hegemon, and managing that relation, and in Trump, because of his unique ego and narcissism, he is manipulatable to a degree that U.S. presidents usually are not. He invites it, he courts it. That's what he wants, right? Everyone is supposed to come to court and pay court to him. That's the way that he sets up his own administration and his relations with all other leaders in the world, right? And Putin is playing that game, although, perhaps from a privileged position of someone who is a peer, or at least very nearly a peer, and he does it from that position. And I get annoyed when I hear Putin playing Trump or playing to him, right, and not responding with shall we say more
brutality.
I don't know, emotion or realism or something of the sort. But that he's the Russian president, and that's what he's doing. And again, there are greater reasons for doing it, and international diplomacy and keeping China and India and Brazil and Indonesia and all of these other BRICS countries, online, and keeping the Middle East powers that are technically U.S. allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar also having very good relations with Russia, and despite what they're doing with the U.S., refusing to side in the geopolitical conflict against Russia. That's a management act, and he has to always, in diplomatic terms, keep that in mind when he's talking and when he's making decisions about what exactly Russia is doing in Ukraine. And he has done it with a diplomatic skill, again, that no one else in the world is capable of, as far as a statesman is capable of. He is the statesman of our generation. There are others. I mean, Xi Jinping is great, of course, and others. But I mean,
no, Putin's a different level.
Nothing in the same category. So no, there is zero chance of a coup against Putin. That is projection, as far as I'm concerned, and it's nonsense.
Just be clear, though, this is an acknowledgement that Trump has, what's the word I'm looking for? A, power. B, that he has latitude. In that office, meaning there's a space in which he can operate that can make life even more miserable for these people or better off. Let's get into the war for a bit. There seems to be an energy war taking place. Now, one of the things that Putin mentioned, he points out how, I think he used Jupiter and the moon as an example, effectively, of saying, how is the U.S. buying uranium from us? But they're taking issue with buying
this is where he quoted Latin. And I cannot quote the Latin expression. I appreciate the erudite quality of anyone who can. It has never been one of my gifts. But he says essentially, what is permitted to Jupiter, meaning Zeus, right, the god of the Greeks and the Romans, that the head of the god, is not permitted to a cow. And it's a way of simply pointing out that there are different power levels, and yes, there is a different standard in between, two different things. And the U.S. as the hegemon is allowed to be hypocritical because it has the power, and that's the expression. It was a wonderful expression, of course, and again, I think it shows the level, the intellectual level that Putin is operating above, so far above this absolutely worthless chaff that is the political elite in Europe and the United States. I mean, I'm sorry, you can say, I mean, Donald Trump is a character, right? He represents the American people, I think. I mean, he is. I actually did. Back when I was doing my postgraduate work at the LSE in London, I was doing Model United Nations and its more modern spin-off security councils, right? Where you create a geopolitical scenario and have different rooms with the security states of each different country making decisions that are effectively moderated by the staff that decides what's happening, right, in a conflict or a crisis situation. And one of the situations I ran was a civil war. This was in 2011. Was a civil war in Ukraine with Russia and NATO entering on both sides. And I decided that Donald Trump was the president of the United States.
Are you serious?
I did. But if you'll remember, Donald Trump ran before his first administration, right? Before that, right? And he didn't have any success, right? He didn't follow through. This was back in, what was it, 2008? Back then. Yeah, 2010. Yeah. And I decided that at some future day, I thought Donald Trump is the perfect representation of the American people. In my fictional scenario, I was going to make him the U.S. president, and that he was going to be manipulated by the neocons in his own administration, including John McCain, who were running a covert war against Russia in Ukraine under his nose. That was the scenario I ran. But of course, it turned out that Donald Trump did become the president. And I think in a way, he is the ultimate representation of democracy, which is why I'm extremely cynical of democracy. I'm cynical of everything, of course, right? So take that for what it's worth. I'm far more concerned with meritocracy than I am with democracy. But ultimately, the American people wanted to be entertained. And that's why they elected a former reality TV and business huckster as their president. And again, that quote to me that sums up Trump perfectly from the movie Gladiator, with Maximus on the floor of one of the arenas after vanquishing his opponent, turning to the crowd and, "Are you not entertained? Is that not why you are here? Are you not entertained?" Right. And then the applause comes, right? And that to me is Trump. I've never seen anything represent him better than that. So he has to be dealt with, but he's not, in any sense of the word, what I would consider a formidable or intelligent or, even, we're going to talk Erdogan, cunning world leader. He is bluff and bluster and, a lack of any serious intelligence or education in a position that is so far above, as still, if fading, the most powerful, richest country in the world by some measures, right? Some others not anymore. China, hi. He has to be dealt with. He has to be dealt with. He has to be managed. And Putin does that better than anyone. Everyone tries to manipulate Trump, including people within his own administration. And again, he invites that, right? He likes his narcissism, his ego being flattered and fed to and everything. But there are ways to do it that are completely ineffective, Zelensky, and just come across as grating. And Putin has a much more subtle, I think, way of dealing. And, as a former intelligence operative himself, I'm sure that he has a psychological profile of Trump that is constantly updated, and how to play things and say certain things and make reference to certain domestic things in the United States, like vote recounts and things like that matter so much
Charlie
on
Kirk.
much on a personal level to Trump, and thus allow a degree of personal manipulation. I think Putin's comments, for instance, on climate change, which are completely at odds with statements that he himself made previously on the issue, and of the position of the Russian Academy of Sciences and Roshydromet, the Russian, science hydrometeorological institution, which are, fully recognizing climate change, what's happening, the anthropogenic quality, and how indeed, catastrophic it is. But then you have, previously, it's not so much right now because it's not really an issue anymore, but particularly during Trump's first administration, Putin made several kind of side comments in the presence of Trump about it that were clearly at odds with things that Putin had said previously, and they were about playing Trump. And I didn't like to hear that, because climate change is a very important issue at an international relations and security, let alone nature level, to me.
Yes.
And I didn't like it, seeing what I consider such a catastrophic issue abused for geopolitical manipulation in that way. But I was also capable of recognizing what Putin is doing.
Yeah, so the way I took Putin's speech was that he was trying to create a separation between Europe and Trump. That it was almost,
he's always trying to do it.
Yeah, but that's the way I took the speech, though. I didn't see it as being him being weak. I took it as him being a diplomat. This notion of, Europe is failing, Europe is falling apart, all of these things are wrong with Europe. Donald Trump, he's here to, he listened, we had conversations, I can work with him, et cetera, trying to create a wedge between these two things, meaning if there's any fault lines between these two things, I am doing my best to create a wedge.
At the end of the day, it may not work out, but that doesn't mean that it is not worth the attempt to try to find that wedge and exploit it, right? And again, even if it is not successful in further widening the transatlantic divide, right? And again, during the first administration, there really was a transatlantic divide. I mean, it was talked about, it was right. And the Europeans hated Trump and Trump hated the Europeans, and there was no question about that. In this second administration, the Europeans have decided in a way how to deal with Trump, right, to prevent that transatlantic divide from re-widening, reigniting at a more even critical time. And that's by being completely servile sycophants to Trump and just rolling over, showing their bellies, and agreeing with everything he says, while they then try to manipulate the events and the situation around him. That's quite clearly what is going on. Putin understands that. Will always try to find that wedge. But once again, even if there is little chance of that actually paying dividends, fruit, it still has diplomatic fruit via the other major BRICS powers, that Putin is showing that he is the diplomatic one. He has, in this respect, the moral high ground. And if India and China and Turkey and other countries were not buying Russian energy and resources and commodities, and also providing avenues, for import substitution and getting things into Russia that Russia does need, then it would be a very different conflict. Russia would be, I'm not saying that, I think Russia would probably have, if we go back to the beginning and redid everything with China and India and other countries to various levels, stopping trade with Russia, we wouldn't be in the position that we are today. I think it would have ended much sooner in terms not favorable to Russia, right? More what the U.S. wanted. So a lot of people, kind of disregard that. And again, there is a tendency in the alt media to perhaps imagine out of a desire, out of a good desire for more unity among non-Western powers than there necessarily is, right? We all want there to be more unity, but I think you also need to be realistic about the degree of unity and how that conflicts at various points with national interest of the respective countries that do indeed have very different national interests.
Yeah.
And it's an important thing to keep in mind when you understand, again, the wider diplomatic game that Putin is playing, not just with Trump, not just with Europe, but with the whole world.
Before I flip over to the war itself, this quote that Putin did, or the comment where he said, pirates will be destroyed. And this was in relation to Macron or France stealing the boat. Of course, there was the thing with Estonia trying to board one of the Russian ships that was warded off by a Russian fighter jet. How serious is he about that? This idea that, look, this is a no-no. You're not going to steal boats. You're not going to grab these things in international waters. This is a no-no. This is not going to happen. We will destroy pirates. Effectively saying all of these countries are on notice for doing this.
I think that is probably on a balance between a real threat and shall we say a bit of bluster. I think that's probably a little bit more on the bluster and bluff side. Again, it depends on the situation. If we take a look at the ship, the Barkane or something, I don't have the exact pronunciation of the word, the tanker that was stopped. This was not a Russian ship. This was not a Russian flag ship. It was not even a Russian flag of convenience ship, right? It was flagged out of Benin. It had a Chinese captain. It had other crew. It was going to India, as far as I understand. That's the reports I have seen. I haven't seen anything to contradict that. I know some people think that because it was a Chinese captain, it was going to China. But I mean, I remember reading somewhere that it was going to India. But how can Russia effectively respond to that? Right? It is an act of piracy. It is an act against the freedom of navigation that for years the West trots out when it's parading their militaries up and down China's coast and other countries. We're here to protect freedom of navigation. The only threats to freedom of navigation for the last couple of decades have been the West, right? And the repeated acts of piracy against countries like Iran and North Korea, and now Trump blowing boats out of international waters because they must be drug dealers. He says so, and that should be good enough for everybody in the Caribbean. That is, I think, quite obviously, Russia and China and others need to get together a fleet and actually protect freedom of navigation from Western countries. Of course, that's not, unfortunately, in the cards, the way the current naval situation in the world works out. But what does Russia do in that situation? Because it's not their ship. It's carrying oil from one of their companies to a company in India. But is it going to go to war because Macron delayed that ship for a few days, which he admitted, had nothing to do with drones. He says it is part of a strategy to, not to necessarily seize these ships, but to delay them and create problems for them and further insurance problems to make the business model unsustainable. And what is he's talking about there? Just last week, a number came out. I reported it on my own channel that the Western sources consider that 17% of the world's maritime oil shipping industry is now part of the shadow fleet, or now it became the dark fleet, right? In some British publication, right? Again, what does that mean? It's not under their control because it's not insured in London. And most of these ships, right? Russia has grown its fleet, right? It has flagships, right? It has grown. It has others that are parts of flags of convenience, but still the majority of the ships involved in trade with Russia are just part of the maritime shipping industry. They can make money by sending their ship to pick up Russian oil and move it somewhere else. And that's why they're doing it. It is pure capitalism, right, of a globalized nature. It has nothing to do with being pro-Russian or anti-Western or anything of the sort. So in those situations, when it occurs to one of those ships, what are Russia's options, right? Not so much. It can't maintain a permanent Russian naval convoy all the way from the Baltic Sea through the Mediterranean and the Suez Canal. That's not a possibility either. So I think more, if you take in Putin's wider comments, I think even more he was saying, okay, Macron, do what you're going to do. Let's see how it works out for you. Because, of course, interdicting regular ships like that is going to have a cost on the French side, or the other Western countries as well. They don't have huge navies. They are extremely expensive to maintain and to operate in this way, and it will disrupt shipping in many ways off their own coast. So I think that is more likely. Now, if they were to try to actually say blockade the Baltic Sea and let no ships through, or more significantly, try to prevent the passage of Russian flagged tankers, that's another story altogether. And Russia would, in that case, be compelled to act in some way. And let's be clear, if you're stopping a Russian flagged merchant ship in international waters, right, which there is through the Baltic Sea, it's a narrow corridor, but by necessity, it is delineated. Then that is an act of war against Russia, an act of war, right? A direct, unquestionable act of war, which is why, in those particular situations, Russia sent, MiGs hurtling towards the Estonian mighty flotilla of patrol boats that were attempting to stop, and why, on the far side of France against an international flagged ship, what can Russian do but bitch about piracy? It's a different situation. So it is what is Russia's response is contextual to the ship involved, where it's flagged, what it's carrying, and where the interdiction takes place. And Macron is, I'm sure, well aware of that. So there is a gray area that he can do this in. And that's why he chose such a ship. And in, the place off the coast of France where Russia really can't do anything about it unless they want to start firing missiles into a NATO country. There is a very complicated gray area. And this is obviously a weak point that can be pressed to a certain advantage. And Macron is obviously going to follow through on that, and other Western countries may follow through. And again, there is a point that they can, to a degree, successfully pursue this, and there are red lines there. Again, Russian flagged ships in a place where Russia can do something about it realistically. That is a different situation entirely. And that area between gray line and red line is now where we're going to be playing on this issue.
I see. I want to move over to the war itself. Russia launched an overwhelming, massive attack on the energy grid of Ukraine.
Several of them over the last week, right?
As a direct
huge
response.
Drone and missile attacks, repeated, bam, 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 bam.
I mean, it's been several different cities that they've been hitting and hammering for the last week. And all of this is in response to Ukraine going after Russia's energy grid. I mean, they were bragging about it. It was like, my gal is going to sleep in
it certainly presents them with a public justification for doing so. Whether or not Russia would have done so without them doing it is another question entirely.
Do you think they would have? I mean, because it didn't seem like they were hammering on the energy grid.
What are we talking about? We've seen several before regime attempts on oil refineries that got wider public press. Russia was already setting records of new large drone attacks, right? Several times, 500, 600, 700, right? So, yes, I think they probably would have. Maybe there was a little bit extra thrown in now because of this, but I'm not so sure that this is some type. It plays very well to present it that way. And if you need to present for domestic political reasons and so deterrence reasons a response. If you already have one plan that you were going to do anyway, and you throw in a few extra things and slap "this is in response" on top of it, that's all well and good. It's part of, they're at war. I mean, come on.
I know, but this seems specific to putting them in blackouts, and not to mention going after trains and everything.
Okay, yes, there is a question that Russia has not pursued the Kiev regime's energy infrastructure over the last half a year the way they, but then again, there is also the point that Russia quite often, as things are moving towards the winter, has accelerated their attacks on the Kiev regime's energy infrastructure. Again, not necessarily to completely knock it out, but to stress things going into the winter season, right? Russia has done that before. So it could be that is the reason, and it could not be. I can't say for sure. And I can't say that these attacks would not have happened if the Kiev regime had not been, pinging a few Russian oil refineries. All I will say on that issue is Bloomberg reported last week that Russia's has again peaked in oil exports. So, I mean, part of the argument they presented there was, well, Russia temporarily, until repairs were made, which have already happened, had slightly less refining capacity. So they just shipped more crude oil to be shipped overseas. So you may temporarily cause a lesser supply of gasoline, right? But on macroeconomic terms, Russia is still making that money. It's just selling it as crude rather. And again, ultimately, right? Let's say they do what they do not have the ability to do right now, which is significantly affect Russia's oil export capacity. How is that going to play out for them? Because it's just going to raise the price of oil globally. They're still getting Russian energy. As everyone admits, it just laundered through India and Turkey. Even Ukraine is getting energy from India, which is ultimately Russian energy, right? Yes. So they're going to be paying more, and Russia will be selling less, but they'll be making more on what they're selling because the global price of oil, the market price, will be increasing. This has been the logical fault in this whole strategy from the beginning of the conflict. Russia is too important an energy and other commodity supplier to the global markets to cut out of it. You are just going to raise costs for yourself, and ultimately Russia will still make bank. It's a failed military economic strategy. And this is the situation as well. Now, Russia's strikes have been, again, they focused more on trains and military logistics than they have. I mean, they have been hitting them, right? But to a much higher degree over the last week. Then the attacks on energy infrastructure, and apparently a reply back to a power station that was supplying power lines to the long cooled down reactors in Chernobyl in response to Kiev regime's shelling of these lines that provide cooling water power to the shut down reactors in Zaporozhye, right? A tit for tat, which Putin talked about openly. You have nuclear reactors too, right? So that was significant, I think. That was something I wouldn't have necessarily expected.
Him owning it, basically saying, look, both of us can do them.
Yeah. So big against their energy infrastructure. Again, maybe this is the beginning of a seasonal campaign. Maybe it was a reply back and a one-off. We'll have to see going forward. And also big, huge hits on the Kiev regime's military industrial, including a brand new facility that was open just across the Polish border in Lvov that was trying to hide big military industrial facilities and warehouses within a big commercial park, commercial industrial park as well, the Sparrow park, as the English is, and they hit that in a major way, and you can see the pictures of the enormous fires going off, and I won't say that they don't manage to sneak anything by Russia, but they obviously they had a video proclaiming its opening last week. They were just asking for it, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, they're going to have some problems with the opening of those facilities, needless to say. After, again, enormous drone and missile strikes by Russia, you can definitely say they have been notching things up a notch again and again and again over the last few months. But last week, they notched them up 2 or 3 notches. They've
also been taking more territory. As this war has been going on. I think they took like 3 villages yesterday. I'm curious on your take on this. Obviously, the Russian military is moving. They seem to be moving faster than what they were doing before. The Ukrainian military, Zelensky just put out a video effectively screaming uncle, saying we should have a ceasefire.
An aerial ceasefire.
Right.
A week ago, he was yelling about hitting the Kremlin, hitting Moscow, blacking out Moscow, hitting the Kremlin, and tomahawks and everything this week. And then a week later, after those up 2-notch airstrikes across the board in Ukraine, he's there. We need an aerial ceasefire. Trump needs to make this happen. It's the only thing that will bring peace. Yeah, it's such a clown. He's such a clown.
Yeah. So, from your point of view, does this still take another year and a half? I always have to ask this question just to check in because things change.
Yeah,
but
I can't make a prediction of the end of this conflict. And again, in one form or another, right? Whether we're talking conflict, frozen conflict, guerrilla war, like I've said from the beginning of this conflict, I really do not believe that in any type of permanent sense, Ukraine will see peace for the rest of my life, which is why I said in February of 2022 for forever war in that particular context. But I do not see an end to this conflict in a year into the future, and beyond that, it's kind of pointless to speculate. The war will continue for another year.
Putin did make a point though about a buffer zone, and if he's talking about a buffer zone, does that indicate that he is talking about we're going to a certain point, we're creating a buffer zone, and we're going to call it a day? Or he doesn't mean it in that sense?
They've bring this up before, and buffer zones have a way of, I think, depending on the situation. Look, when Russia takes all of Donbass, right, which will happen sometime next year, right? Hopefully in the first half of the year. At the beginning of I think I'm definitely the most cautious and perhaps, maybe people would say pessimistic in my predictions. And I predicted that by the end of this year, that Russia would have taken or all but taken all of Donbass, right? That they would finish out the autumn with Slavyansk and Kramatorsk and Konstantinovka. And that is 6 months too optimistic, right? Now, it's already been clear for about 2 months now, but I was too optimistic and everyone else was far too optimistic, right? It's still a long, bloody, grinding slog on the ground, right? Putin talking about trickling advances and saying, well, their advances, it's just, the technological, fighting all of NATO, that's what it comes to, to limit our own casualties to what the Kremlin considers an acceptable level. But now Slavyansk, Kramatorsk is 6 months, into next year. So that still shows. And after that happens, again, Russia will turn to Kiev and turn to the West and say, we have now achieved this goal. Are you done yet? Have you seen sense? And if not, they'll begin moving for Zaporozhye city and Kherson city and taking these things that they've already claimed and had hoped to achieve through settlement rather than having to take them militarily. At the same time, they'll be moving deep into Dnipropetrovsk. They'll be moving, encircling Kharkov. And these sorts of things will all be happening in the second half of next year. And again, they will turn to the West and say, are you done? right? Can we now, sit? The terms have gotten harder, as we said it would, but are you done yet? And when they say no, then Russia will continue, if presuming they say no, and I do presume they will say no, but hey, we can always hope, I guess, that they will see sense and so forth. I don't believe they will, but I would be happy to be proven wrong on that regard. They'll move on to the next step then, and then the step after that will be crossing the Dnieper and probably another move on Kiev, and that will probably be late 2026, 2027.
Oh, Jesus. I was reading, I think it was Simplicus the Thinker. He was talking about this kind of change in warfare, where when Putin is talking about a trickle, he really means a trickle, like 2 or 3 man teams that are effectively moving through because of the way.
Said that on this channel before.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to wrap my head around. Like
it's
2 or 3
because of the modern nature of drone warfare.
That is just not safe.
Both sides, where they have the urban facilities to do it, have enormous drone screens, FPV drone screens, right? Russia, of course, has artillery and other, type of things weighing in on that create kill zones in front of their forces. And, then there becomes a joint kill zone where basically nothing can survive in between the two forces. And there is always in this conflict, at the actual contact line, been considerably less forces involved in actual encounter battles than a lot of people think, right? The majority of forces are falling back. And that is because we live in a world of 24/7 satellite and drone reconnaissance and extremely precise long-range precision strikes that prevent you from forming a critical mass of troops on either side that are necessary to punch through and exploit situations. So the strategy has long been on both sides. This was actually the strategy that the Kiev regime shifted to late in the day in their failed 2023 offensive. After they gave up on the Pentagon's combined arms maneuver Jedi warfare, Zelensky switched to this. But the Russian defenses were too well manned, too well, 5 layers deep, too well manned, right? Small teams trying to infiltrate the lines. But Russia is able to make this tactic work now because the Kiev regime, the contact line, they keep stretching it out, right? Expanding it. The Kiev regime has such a shortage of forces. They themselves admit it. We don't have enough, not my propaganda. Their own commanders talk about it all the time, that they don't have enough troops to man, and there are large areas of the front line, without people manning them, right? And so Russian forces are able to slip through those FPV, small enough groups to be, have a better chance of not being identified, slipping through the lines, and then forming a critical mass on the other side of those defensive lines where they're not necessarily, they're beyond or inside the space of that kill zone. And that's the tactic that Russia, the infiltration tactic, it's been referred to, or Putin talked about it, trickling. This has been going for months now. In fact, there was again something that has been pointed out previously, but punched home again this week. Russia's using practically no tanks at the front line.
Yeah.
Even vastly decreased levels of infantry fighting vehicles. Why? Because they immediately become fodder for FPV drones that, if they can't destroy them, can then take them out and then immobilize them in repeated strikes. So why waste them when the infiltration works better? It's slow, right? But it's, as Putin said, an advance is an advance. It's the nature of warfare now, right? You put out a big mass of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, you assemble them together to punch through defensive lines. They're going to be spotted by U.S. satellites and drones and everything else, and then there'll be a swarm of drones, and there'll be incoming multiple launch rocket system strikes, HIMARS, and everything else on them in a second, right? It makes it very hard to do. It's just the nature of modern warfare. Because the sides, even with all the advantages Russia has, the Kiev regime is still in the same ballpark. They're still
Right.
playing with a lot of the same capabilities, even if at a radically reduced quantity and in some cases quality. They're still in the same part. It is not the US beating up on Iraq, right? This is all of NATO forming their logistical operation and strategic rear against Russia. And the two sides are, you know, again, for all of Russia's advantages in this conflict, logistically and otherwise, it's still close enough that with the modern technological advances, you know, the drone warfare and electronic warfare and everything else, this is what we're reduced to: small and 2-man, 3-man squads sneaking through kill zones and then forming critical masses on the other side of poorly manned defensive lines.
Wow.
But it's working, right?
It's working.
It's not fast enough to satisfy that gut instinct for seeing your enemy smashed and faster, right? It's really hard from a Western supportive, you know, armchair quarterback standpoint to say, why aren't we going faster? You know, we know we have advantage, this advantage, and that advantage, and everything else. Why is Putin holding back? It's really not, right? You know, not without an unacceptable level of casualties. It's just the nature of modern warfare and the matchup between NATO-backed Ukraine and Russia.
Wow. I was fascinated by that, by the way. When I read that, it was like 2 to 3-man teams.
We actually mentioned that before, but it's receiving wider attention now. But what other world leader can talk about what's, you know, on the other side, can talk honestly about what's happening on the contact line? And when he talks ATACMS and Tomahawks, he's like, yeah, they hit us, they hurt us, right? We adapted and we'll adapt again. But you know, they'll damage us a bit in the process, but ultimately it's not going to change the strategic level calculus on the battlefield.
Mark Sleboda, best in the business. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find Mark on Boosty, Boosty. Look up Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda, or just put in Mark Sleboda. He will appear. Mark, thank you for this, man. Check him out, by the way. Check out his location. Check out the Boosty thing. I always get your updates when you send those out. Much appreciated for it. Definitely give Mark a look. He's, like I said, when I said best in the business, I mean it. You be safe, Mark. Have a good day, man. Be safe.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. All right. Great update, as normal, by Mark Sleboda. I have a new guest coming on that I am eager to talk to. We are joined with Roger Harris. Roger Harris. Well, first, let me say hi. How you doing, Roger? You doing okay today?
Good morning, Jamal. We're having a technical problem. I do not hear your audio. If you can direct me to getting the audio, I would find that helpful.
I can hear you. Can you hear me at all?
No, I'm still not hearing your audio.
Okay, 1 minute. Let me see. Is your mic? Is your speaker on? Because I hear a hiss coming from you.
I am not hearing you. I'm sorry.
Hold on. No. Don't apologize.
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Hold on. I'll see your text.
No, my apologies. I am still not hearing you. I'm going to go on WhatsApp and see if you're speaking to me. So on WhatsApp, I see that you can hear me. I cannot hear you. And I am unfamiliar with StreamYard, I'm afraid, so I've not seen where there is a my speakers are on. Let me check something else.
Okay, Roger will be back. He's trying to work out. He's trying to work out his system. Um, I will bring him back on when he comes back. I will be checking at the bottom. Let's see. I wonder. Yeah, he's fixing his audio. And yeah, you're right. Good idea. Let me introduce them. Roger Harris. Roger Harris, he taught political science at historically
No, I
black
still do
college.
not hear you.
Oh,
And
let
my
me.
speakers are not working. Okay, what I'm going to do is close out this program and then come right back.
Yes. All right, so let me give Roger's bio. Roger Harris taught political science at historically black college in Mississippi in the late 1960s and was involved in the civil rights movement and community organization in East Harlem, New York. Roger is on state central committee of the California Peace and Freedom Party and on the board of human rights organizations, the Task Force on the Americans. He is program committee for Marxist Forum and on the secretariat of the U.S. Peace Council. He's active in Sanctions Kill campaign and the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. He is co-founder of Venezuela Solidarity Network and was an election accompanier for the last presidential election in Venezuela. His political writings may be regularly found on Counterpunch, LA Progressive, Antiwar.com, Venezuela Analysis, and the Orico Tribune. He is a fantastic guest on this. I'm really hoping this works. Okay, how about now? Can you? Oh, you're muted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? You're muted. Let's see if I can do anything about this. Let's do unmute. Okay, he's muting himself. Roger, you are. Okay,
I'm
good.
not
You're
muted
unmuted.
anymore,
Can you hear me?
but that's the microphone. The speakers are what's the problem right now, and
Let's see. Hold on, guys. Technical issue. We'll work it out. Yeah, we can hear him.
okay, I'm picking up the volume.
Oh,
but
okay. Still can't hear me.
Still don't hear you. The volume is high, but the transmission is low.
I'm trying to think. What can it be?
That was a good advice.
All right. Let's see. What about? Do you have another application open? Yeah, we can hear him. He just can't hear us. Or he can't hear me.
I'm still not getting sound, and I still don't know why. I do have headphones. I can try them.
Okay, how about now?
Headphones on.
Can you hear me?
But no, I don't hear.
Still can't hear me. Damn
Headphones
it.
on.
All right. What else? What else? What else? Okay. Trying to work this out. Yeah, I'm trying to Rain. That's what I asked him about, whether or not I could just call him. And since we can hear him just fine, if I can call him, then it'll make it simple. Just film. I'm getting his consent before I call him. I don't do anything without consent. Come on. It's a CIA sabotage. No, sometimes it just happens this way. Yeah, and see, but I don't know how to ask him to do that. Like, if it was me, I would try to suss it out. I don't know how to ask him to suss it out, if that makes sense. No, communists. Give us 1 second, guys. We're trying to work it out. Tell him Dow. D-O-W. I don't know if he's going to know what that means. Okay. Let me bring it back on.
You,
Can you hear me?
so I clicked. I don't hear you now, but you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I call you? Can I call? Roger, check the phone.
Okay, so you're going to call me.
Yes.
Okay. But I don't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Because I can hear you on. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So one thing, I need you to cut the volume down on the speaker because it's vocally coming through.
Okay. Give me 1 minute. I'm gonna put it in earbuds and.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. We're gonna make this work. Damn it, we're gonna make it work. Not gonna get out. All right, we're making this work. He's going to get him. He's in the jungle, I know. Don't worry, I will edit this out. Yeah, this will be edited out.
Okay, let's see if this works.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
And do I have any reverb, or is this work? Are we now technically fine?
No, we're technically fine. I can hear you just fine. No issues at all.
Terrific. Okay, let's go.
Excellent.
Let's go for it.
All right, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for working through the technical stuff. I really appreciate it.
Same here.
I gave your pedigree online. You have a hell of a bio in regards to the things that you have done. And the Venezuelan solidarity, I guess that's part of the reason and rationale why you're here. I want to play a clip for you. Now, you may not, you're not going to be able to hear what's in this clip, but I will tell you what's in this clip. This is Donald Trump talking about Venezuela. And what he, I'm just going to show it and I'll explain after the fact. The audience can hear it, even though you may not be able to.
The Navy has supported our mission to blow the cartel terrorists the hell out of the water. You see that? And you know, there are no boats in the water anymore. We can't find any. We're having a hard time finding them. But you know, it's a pretty tough thing we've been doing, but you have to think of it this way. Every one of those boats is responsible for the death of 25,000 American people and the destruction of families.
Now, he's saying that every one of those
I could hear it. Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay.
So when you think of it that way, what we're doing is actually an act of kindness. But we did another one last night. Now we just can't find any. You know, it's the old story. We're so good at it that there are no boats. In fact, even fishing boats, nobody wants to go into the water anymore. Sorry to tell you that. But it's we're stopping drugs coming into America, if that's okay. We're stopping drugs at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Last year, we lost, I believe, 300,000 people. And that's not talking about the destruction to families. Every one of us knows families that have been destroyed because the son, daughter, even mothers and fathers are destroyed by the fentanyl pouring in and drugs pouring in. Well, they're not coming in by sea anymore. So now we'll have to start looking about the land because they'll be forced to go by land. And let me tell you right now, that's not going to work out well.
So, Donald Trump, there's so much wrong with the speech, right? He is talking about murdering random people and is trying to use fentanyl as a rationale for killing, again, random people because we would have to believe that Donald Trump is being honest when he's saying we know exactly who's coming on those boats. This doesn't really make sense. He's bragging about murdering another group of people who are apparently on boats and has extended this now to saying, well, since we don't have anybody to murder on boats anymore, we need to go into land and find people to murder over land, which is effectively he's talking about militarily attacking Venezuela. Give me your thoughts on that speech, not to mention the people clapping behind him like seals. It's disgusting. But give me your thoughts on that speech.
The speech has a long pedigree. It starts in 1998 when Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela. And just 1 second, I got an echo, but I think I can take that echo out. Just 1 second. There was a setting that took. Oh, okay. So that speech has a long pedigree. That speech goes back to the U.S. policy that started with the very beginning of the Bolivarian Revolution, which began in 1998, 1999, when Hugo Chavez won the presidency and then assumed the presidency in 1999. And ever since then, the United States has been going to trying to asphyxiate that revolution, make it end. The very fact that Donald Trump is making this speech today shows the failure of U.S. policy to end the Bolivarian Revolution. The revolution has continued and has been successful, and so now they're escalating it. And they're trying to escalate it by just completely trampling international law and basically saying that the United States has license to kill anybody at any time.
Agreed. No, 1,000% agreed. I mean, giving your take on the drugs argument that he's effectively trying to make. I mean, there's so much wrong with this. I mean, it's amazing that this is even legal for a president to do, just randomly kill people, and then making this connection between 25,000 people have died for every, I guess, boat that made it to the United States. Meaning he's trying, it's almost like a weapons of mass destruction in Iraq argument that he's effectively making. We have justification to kill random people in boats because there's a drug issue in the United States and we're blaming Venezuela for our own drug issues. Initially, by the way, it was China. Now it's Venezuela.
Yeah, it's completely transparent. What he's doing there is he's trying to justify the further penetration of U.S. military dominance over the world, but particularly here in Venezuela. And for good reason, because Venezuela does represent the threat of a good example to the United States. So that's the background. Who is making these accusations? We're talking about the country that is the largest consumer of drugs in the world. Now, there'll never, ever be a solution to the drug problem until the biggest user stops using it. So that's not even addressed. It's not even addressed that the United States is the largest producer of precursors for producing drugs. It's not mentioned that the United States is the largest supplier of weaponry for the cartels. And it's not mentioned particularly, and this is something that the South Americans and the Latin Americans have continually reminding Uncle Sam. What they're saying is that the United States is the biggest launderer of drug money. And that's not just speculative. Banks like the Wells Fargo have been caught done that. Most of our major banks in the United States have been involved in laundering drug money. Drugs are a very big thing in the United States. And this is the president of this country who is really the biggest user and facilitator of drugs, actually making those accusations. The accusations are completely false. To begin with, we can go into why those accusations are false. But what is really, really important is to realize that they are simply a ruse. Because the policy has always been regime change in Venezuela. That's what the purpose is. There used to be that we were trying to promote, we being the United States government, was trying to promote democracy. Well, they've dropped that. Apparently because under this current administration, they've exported so much democracy, we don't have any of it left in the United States. But in any case, they've stopped that ruse of promoting democracy, and they've gone to another ruse, and this is the drug thing. What's very, very dangerous about it is that they've melded the war on drugs with the war against terrorism. Yes. And this is what this makes this whole thing extremely dangerous. It's a new escalation because anybody can be called a terrorist. A terrorist is just a term of art. It's a person that Washington doesn't like, and it gives them license, or at least they believe that it gives them license to murder on the high seas and perhaps to even invade a country.
So the New York Times was reporting that the Trump administration had been working with the political opposition, and now Donald Trump is effectively saying he's planning strikes on Venezuela. Are we looking at an invasion attempt by the United States?
Yeah, so if I might comment about the opposition in Venezuela.
Please.
Again, what we're seeing right now in terms of U.S. foreign policy and the actions of the Trump administration is the failure to create an astroturf opposition in Venezuela. The so-called head of the opposition is this person, Maria Corina Machado, person that spent most of her life in the United States. She went to Yale. She speaks very good English. She's fairly photogenic, a perfect opposition person. And there was a recent poll in Venezuela, and she polled a 92% disapproval rating. So this is the opposition that the United States has chosen. And I should say that the United States, there is genuine opposition. There are people that are unhappy with the government, as in every country. But the United States has chosen, handpicked the opposition that is the extreme right-wing opposition. They haven't actually chosen opposition that actually could be popular with people, because there is discontent. There's discontent in every country, but particularly a country that's under the sanctions of the United States. There's discontent, but they haven't even tried to use an opposition that could win. What they've used is an opposition that is so extreme. I should mention that this opposition is strongly allied with Israel and has been from the very get-go. And this is not a very popular position in Latin America. They are not very gung-ho on genocide. This opposition is for privatization of the entire economy, education, healthcare, everything else. This is a very unpopular opposition, yet the United States is behind that. Why are they behind that? Because they want to root out the Bolivarian revolution. And the revolution is very deep. So they're looking for an extreme example.
I mean, I guess, yes. I mean, that was the whole Juan Guaido thing, right? Where Juan Guaido was apparently the president of Venezuela, and the U.S. pretended as if he was president of Venezuela, and that went absolutely nowhere. I guess my thing is, do you think, like, people are questioning whether or not the U.S. is serious about attacking Venezuela because they were thinking, well, they don't have enough force for some kind of invasion to be successful. Give me your take on that. I mean, are we looking at what seems to be an invasion? Are we looking at some kind of political destabilization through strikes? What do you think is happening here with this force off Puerto Rico?
Let me tell you what I think is clear and then what is not clear. What is clear is the objective, which is to end the Bolivarian Revolution. That's clear. And I think what also is clear is that the United States is putting incredible pressure on Venezuela, trying to see if something will break. Will the political leadership under Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, will that fracture? Will there be defections from the political leadership? They're looking for whether the people who have been under extreme duress. I mean, imagine that if you were living in Barlovento area on the Caribbean in Venezuela, an Afro-descendant community, and you make a living fishing, and now you can't go fishing, and you can't make a living. They're seeing if those people will defect. And particularly what they're looking for is the unity between the people and the military. And this is something that we don't really understand here in the United States because we don't have a unity between the military and the people. But there they really do have, and they're looking for defections from the military. So they're trying to see if there's going to be a crack. And what they can do is, there's a lot of speculation in social media. I've been following that. And people are talking about, well, they don't have enough troops to invade. They can do this. Maybe they'll take out an airport. Those are very speculative. But behind that speculation, I should mention, Jamal, because this is something that we should understand, that feeding the flames of speculation, creating more and more pressure, has been the U.S. corporate press. This morning, right before I came online, I did a Google search, actually, in my, not Google, but I use another web browser. Venezuela news. What's the latest news? Well, still at the top of the news cycle is an NBC report that came out in September 26th. That's about 2 weeks ago. And this report is absolutely hilarious if you look at it sort of carefully. It's a 53-second news clip from a reporter. His name is Gabe Gutierrez, and Gabe Gutierrez is, according to this news clip, is at the White House, and he's talking about how the United States is planning to go and make a strike within Venezuelan land territory. What's hilarious is that this guy is at the lighthouse in the sense that he's standing in front of the lighthouse. Now, you could have sent me in front of a mailbox and said, East reporter Roger Harris is reporting in front of a federal facility. It's that hilarious. And then this particular report has become, I'm still getting echo. This particular report has become viral. Everybody in the corporate press is quoting NBC saying the United States is planning to do a land invasion on Venezuela. This is based by some dude standing in a preppy suit giving a microphone on the street in front of the White House. It's not like he has any information at all. But what it is, it goes back to like the battleship Maine in 1898, the First Imperial War, where the Hearst Press created the war. The United States mass media, the corporate media, is pushing this war.
I agree with that the U.S. is pushing for the war, but I guess is there a reality to it? I mean, because it's not like the Spanish ship has been hit, and then you have all of this yellow journalism about obviously the Spanish did this, et cetera, et cetera. This is the Trump administration moving ships in the region, murdering Venezuelans, and now openly saying we are going to hit Venezuela. So that rando guy, he has no information to agree with you, and he may even be pushing Washington propaganda in order to ramp up pressure. But so let me ask it this way. So you don't think that there's a reality beyond the pressure. You think that the entire point is pressure, not an invasion, and maybe not even strikes, but the entire point is to put pressure on Venezuela to see if it breaks.
I would say that it's clear that pressure is the proximate goal, but that doesn't rule out. It doesn't rule out an invasion. It doesn't rule out decapitating the leadership of the Venezuelan government. They already have a hit list. It's called the sanctions. They have a number of officials that are sanctioned, and they could try to take them out, just like they did, like the Israeli and United States offensive in Iran. That could happen here in Venezuela as well. So those are realities. And I would add that the Venezuelans themselves, and this is the important thing, is they take this threat real. President Maduro has declared a state of emergency. The military has been mobilized. They have recruited over 8 million people into the civilian militias, and they're preparing for an invasion, and they should, because if they're unprepared, that will be an invitation to have an invasion. So they're preparing for it. What I would say, from my point of view, is that I don't know anything more than those reporters of what they will do. We know what their aim is, and we know that they won't rest until they get their aim. But we also know that the Venezuelans and the international community of the global South are united against U.S. imperialism and will push back.
This is an unfortunate development, put it mildly, especially for the quote-unquote peace president that Donald Trump claimed himself to be. Roger, thank you for this. Great breakdown.
Thank you very much.
Excellent explanation. And I'm sorry for the technical glitches, but I'm glad we were able to still get this interview in. Deeply appreciate it. You be safe, okay?
Same here. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. All right. And this was Roger Harris. I'm going to give his bio. I'm going to give his breakdown. Thank you for this, Roger. All right. Roger Harris. Roger Harris is taught political science at the historically Black college in Mississippi in the late 1960s. He was involved in the civil rights movement and community organizing in East Harlem, New York City. Roger is on the state and central committee for California Peace and Freedom Party and on the board for human rights organization, the Task Force on the Americas. He is on program committee for Marxist Forum and on the Secretariat of the United States Peace Council. He is active in Sanction Kill campaign and Nicaragua Solidarity Campaign or Coalition. He is co-founder of the Venezuela Solidarity Network and was an election accompanier for last year's presidential election in Venezuela. His political writings can be regularly found on Counterpunch, LA Progressive, Antiwar.com, Venezuela Analysis, and I think this is Arenico Tribune. Shout out to Roger. He stuck around trying to figure out what on earth has been going on. And I deeply appreciate him for doing so. I apologize for the hissing that was coming from whatever was going on with his sound setup. But I do appreciate him joining me, and I do appreciate him trying to work out the issues, even though we had to do it by phone. So, as I said, that's an unfortunate development. Whether Trump is going to strike Ukraine, whether they're going to do a decapitation strike or not, I don't know. The United States has allowed Israel to do whatever it wanted. They are murdering people in the Caribbean. We're well beyond this notion of international law, international norms. So who knows what is going to happen with this? Obviously, they're trying to put pressure on Venezuela. Obviously, the United States will prefer something to be given to them as opposed to having to actually militarily take it. But if it doesn't break, if Maduro's coalition remains intact, obviously the opposition is hated, and it would take something kinetic in order to get that opposition into power. Whether Trump would do it or not, I don't put it past him. But does it mean he'll do it? I don't know. I don't know. Either way, shout out to Roger. Roger was fantastic in his breakdown. I just wish we could have fixed the audio. Yeah, I wish we could fix the audio. He's a great guest. He's a very good guest. Let's see. We have one chat. This is Tulio Pantaclonio. Star Trek Original Series, Season 1, Episode 23, A Taste of Armageddon, in reference to Mark Sleboda. A Taste of Armageddon. I would know it if I see it. I don't know it off the top of my head what that one is. But shout out to you for Star Trek reference. Always enjoy a good Star Trek reference. That stuff applies so often. I saw somebody in the chat talking about Professor, don't ask me to give his name, it's a Chinese professor. He teaches high school. You would think that he was teaching something higher than high school, just at the level of conversation he's having. I think he's hit or miss on some of those conversations, but I like the way he thinks. So shout out to whoever in the chat that was bringing that up. We have lost Captain Kirk. Why are you laughing? That shouldn't get a laugh. That should get a frown. That should get a cry. Captain Kirk was the coolest white man on the planet. Coolest white man on planet Earth. Planet Earth. United States of Israel destroying the planet. That is an understatement. I don't know if you've seen the pictures of Gaza that came out recently. This was, by the way, gotta hit this. There are some people who I actually like on Twitter that I actually like. But I think they are seeing the world in unclear terms. Hegseth came out and gave a commentary. I think he was talking to Peter Doocy. And Peter Doocy effectively asked them, like, which enemy is next or something like that. I forget the exact question. I'm going to play it. And those people who are on Twitter, I'm not going to name names. I'm trying to be a better person. Trying to get out of my old YouTube face when I was just a random bloke on YouTube as opposed to trying to do news. This person has made the argument before that they believe that the United States is disentangling itself from the world, that the U.S. is pulling back. And they've been making this argument, and any little thing that comes up, they've used that in order to try to bolster their argument. I think their argument is rubbish. The United States trying to find a cheaper way to do empire is not the same thing as the U.S. pulling back. Meaning, the Roman Empire bringing in quote-unquote barbarians in order to fill out their ranks is not the Roman Empire withdrawing from the world. There's a difference in those things. Just because you may see the U.S. saying, yeah, we're pulling back, we believe in the multipolarity now, doesn't in fact mean that they mean it, or that multipolarity in the way that you're talking about multipolarity is the same way that the U.S. sees multipolarity. Meaning the U.S. may look at the world stage and say, yeah, we need more actors in the stage. By the same token, we need to lead and control those actors in various sectors of the world for us to maintain a certain level of control. That's not withdrawing from the world. That is finding a new way to do empire, or at the very least, a new tactic or new strategy and doing empire. There's a difference in those things. This was Hegseth.
We're making the rules.
Listen to the question, listen to the answer, and I want to go into it.
Our own civilians who can never be party to leaking. We're setting clear rules at the Pentagon. We're not playing games. We're not allowing everybody to roam around the building. You know, that was the policy before, Peter. If you were a Pentagon reporter, you could just walk around the building. No badge, no escort, no nothing. Walk into offices, talk to anybody. Who knows where there's classified information. We're making the rules more like you might say the White House. Can you roam the White House wherever you want?
Typically not without getting a Secret Service guy up in my grill.
So we're just normalizing it. Yes, you can be in the press area.
Okay, that was not exactly the video that I wanted. This is the video that I wanted to play. Let's try this one more time.
Or Antifa. The way that you see it right now at the Department of War, the greater, which would be the greatest threat to the U.S. homeland? China, Russia, or Antifa?
Well, depends on where you are, right? I mean, ultimately, looks like Navy just scored.
They like that answer.
They like that answer a lot. I think they vote for defending the homeland. Ultimately, we're going to defend the homeland first. That's most important. The invasion of our southern border, what Joe Biden unleashed, is a sin. It's a sin. And we're undoing it by locking down the border and supporting mass deportations. Not knowing who's in your country when they're not citizens is dangerous. You name it, whether it's Antifa, whether it's cartels, foreign terrorist organizations, whether it's Iranians, you name it, Islamists, you can't have it. So we're locking that down while at the same time ensuring we have the kind of power projection posture. That's why President Trump spent $1 trillion. We're going to spend even more so that we can project power. Our ship is capable of doing that. Our Air Force is capable of doing that so that our adversaries far away don't feel like they can move into our hemisphere and threaten us here. So there are a lot of threats. Defending the homeland is first and foremost.
Question. Who's threatening the United States? What quote unquote adversary is talking about moving forces near the United States? Who's doing that? I'm always curious when they bring this up. If you notice, he pointed out, we're spending $1 trillion. We're probably going to spend more. Okay. He said, we're going to lock down the border. So we're going to deal with that. And then he immediately moves into this idea of power projection. When you see Donald Trump talking about attacking Venezuela, when you see Donald Trump talking about attacking Iran, quote unquote, again, what of that do you come away with saying the U.S. is only going to deal with its withdrawing from the world? How is potentially invading Venezuela or militarily attacking Iran and maintaining the war in Ukraine, how are these things withdrawing from the world? It doesn't seem like it. I understand that this person on Twitter, they're very famous. You would know who I'm talking about if you're hanging out on Twitter. They want to believe that. They want to believe it. I am not seeing anything that makes it true. And somebody writing a policy paper saying the United States should withdraw, or just because Hegseth saying we're going to focus on domestic priorities and then immediately switches over to we're going to project power around the world. If you're projecting power around the world when nobody's threatening or nobody's attacking you, then you can't say you're withdrawing from the world. Those are two very different things. I don't know if they listened to the entirety of that quote or not, but they are missing the boat, and they're missing the boat royally. This is not a picture of a country withdrawing. This is a picture of a country collapsing, its internal order collapsing. I mean, for God's sake, they're putting military in various parts of the United States while simultaneously still trying to maintain some level of control. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Boss. Boss with Kelsey Grammer. Fantastic show. Fantastic show. The show is amazing. Kelsey Grammer goes full retarded in that show. They say never go full retarded. Kelsey Grammer goes full retarded. He deserved an Emmy, a Grammy, or whatever the hell for his role in that show. That's how good Kelsey Grammer was at that show, on that TV show. It's called Boss. Kelsey Grammer is losing his mind, literally. The show opens with him being told by a doctor that you have a degenerative neurological issue where your ability to understand reality is going to get worse and worse and worse. effectively, you're screwed. And Grammer's response to that, who has had this dominant power position as mayor of Chicago, where he was able to control government, governor, all of the stuff, his response is not to leave. His response is to double down on issues of power and control. So he is a man who is literally losing his mind as he holds on to power in Chicago and in the larger state of Illinois. It is a fantastic show. My point is the U.S. looks like Kelsey Grammer, a man who clearly has faculties that are diminishing, losing the capability of doing basic things. The government is literally shut down as we speak. This is Baltimore. Just to give you an example of what I mean by this. This is, you remember that the boat hit Baltimore. Now, this happened while I was in Washington, D.C. I remember when it happened. And there was all of this talk about how much it's going to cost to rebuild, all of this stuff. This is where they are in the rebuilding process. China would have had this thing up 3 times over right now. This is where they are in the building process.
For the day.
Nowhere. Nowhere. This has been like 2 years. Basic things. We've lost the capability of doing basic things. Can't keep the government open, can't pass high-speed rail, can't pass a decent budget. Things like healthcare, education, all of those things take a hit because they need to take more and more money to give to the rich. I'm saying that this is a symptom of a society that is in constant, ever-present decline. And like Kelsey Grammer in that show, who's functionally, literally, in real terms, brain is turning to mush with his capacity to think and everything else he's seeing. He's having hallucinations. He is clearly out of his mind. And I'm saying Hegseth, Trump, Rubio, these are perfect icons for this. They want to project power in a war that they've lost that may end us up in a larger third world war. There's that, which would destroy everything. They are trying to do any and everything in their power to get into a fight with China. They've lost the tariff war with China already, and yet is still trying to create provocation with China. And from the standpoint of Iran, he is openly talking about attacking Iran. He is openly talking about attacking Venezuela, neither of which has attacked or threatened the United States. We can't even keep our own house in order. And we're sitting out here postulating, hey, we're going to spend more than $1 trillion to attack people and for invisible threats. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah. There is that. The United States can't even lay 2 miles of train tracks in 10 years. Yes, peacemaker, yes. I mean, think about California. California was supposed to be building high-speed rail. I can show you the images coming out of China of the railways, the roadways, the astonishing work, like just groundwork that needed to be done for them to build some of that architecture. It is mind-blowing. China is building like several ships in the time it takes the U.S. to build one ship. We've lost something. There's something that's not connecting here. And yet these guys are still talking about power projection around the world because apparently nobody's tapped them on the shoulder and pointed out, hey, you know, those days of you being a hegemon, not so much. And if you continuously push this idea that you're a hegemon, you're going to embroil us into a war that's going to end it all. Personally, I think that's where Putin's speech came in, that poem that Putin read. I don't think he was specifically just talking about NATO, nor do I think he was specifically talking about just Ukraine. I think that speech could be expanded into this idea of a war happened that reshaped, let's say, the point of view of the world in regards to the relative powers of these countries. And Ukraine, yes, you can make an argument, is that war, but that war hasn't ended. And it very well could go into a third world war, which also will have that unfortunate, I can't even call it the benefit if the world ends, but a distinction of setting the context of the world and changing that context of the world in real, brutal, overwhelming, clear as day terms, in a way that up to this point, it doesn't seem that the various countries in the West want to acknowledge or own up to. So If we are here in 5 years, we can say Putin got it right. If we are not, it's happy to know you all. I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. Shout out to Tulio. Thank you for this, man. Look, I always tell you these shows are often demonetized. And as such, it's you that makes the show run. Thank you for supporting the content. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for watching. You can always support this content. PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Buy Me a Coffee. Oh, what else? God, there's so many. Memberships, etc. You all have my thanks. You be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Jang, that's it. Jang. He's hit and miss. He's hit and miss. That's the name of the professor. He's hit and miss. Like there's some things where he nails, and there are other things where you're like, you're doing a bit of speculating, buddy. You're doing a lot of speculating. But as thought pieces, yeah, he's really good. Again, do not take what he is saying as word of God, because a lot of that stuff is hit and miss, and a lot of that stuff is his conjecture. But I like the way he looks at it. I like the way he looks at it. He's very skeptical of history, and is very kind of like, yeah, but does this really make any sense? What would be the motivation for the people to act this way? What is more likely to be true? No, he's fascinated on that front. He really is. All right, what is this? Mr. Thomas, it's not demonetized, so throw money if you got it. Well, cash always helps the show. It always helps the show keep going because, again, there's no way to know one way or the other whether the show is going to be monetized. Captain Kirk equals Captain Cook. Roddenberry admitted it. Captain Cook. Captain Cook. I need context for the Captain Cook thing. I need context for the Captain Cook thing. All right. You all have a fantastic rest of your day. It's outside of you. Yeah, it's outside of you. He's good at that. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. And I'll see you all bright and early tomorrow morning, same place, same time. Be safe all.